take it as read.
There'll be questions on this one.
Vote it through.
Oh, now, Dave, Andrew, on the computer thing, the survey thing.
Yep.
Dave's got a computer as
Cut
a
spam
particular setting on his computer that deletes everything that goes into his junk mail. Because it's a survey monkey survey, which is completely online, it's going into the junk mail. So I've got IS to figure out how to change the setting so that they can pull the email out so he can complete it.
Is he the only one?
Can't, everybody else, I don't know if everyone else is completing it, but everybody else has received the link and can complete it like Mark did his last night.
Okay.
So, once IS have sorted, we know it won't delete it again. Brendan's going to, because he's already run their enumeration, and they will reset, so he's going to bring them again and at that point tell them to reset it to anybody who hasn't completed.
Okay.
We ready to rumble, Mr. Mayor?
Paul here, is he? Yep.
Should we get going, team?
Having said that, Andrew,
I don't think I can. I don't think it's for me.
that's what the rep already said.
I never ever got a link. I'm pretty sure it's... What can you find out?
I'll let them.
I'm happy to do it if I'm supposed to,
I'll
okay.
tell them
So can I just remind members before we start again about the survey that we were emailing around last night? And Dave, I know you're being sorted out by higher authorities to ensure it doesn't delete again.
It did go into the spam box again.
Yeah.
I've got proof of that now.
Yeah, well, I think they're working on it.
It has to be personalised. You can't grab someone else's link into it.
Yeah,
It's a stupid system.
yeah. Anyway, it is quite important.
Could it just, when they ask us again, send a link, what's it again, instead of...
We're doing, if you haven't done it, we're doing that now. If you haven't done it. Oh, you've done it, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, Leanne's working now on exactly who has and hasn't and ensuring that links get through to everybody.
We get on?
I'm just waiting for Paul. Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank
so
you, Mayor.
we're on item 7, page 277.
Just like the previous item, we just got a 10-minute speaking slot prior to the item for both the submitters on behalf of the neighbourhood group and the applicants again. So I'd just like to introduce Aramar Pereri, Chairman of Gilbert Avenue, Remington Drive, Hastings Place Residents Incorporated Society. So here, come and have a 10 minutes chat.
So I think the way we'll do this, including questions, is a total of 20 minutes. So it could be mixed or matched either way from when you start. So if it's 5 minutes speaking, then it'll be 15 minutes for the question if required.
Sure.
And we'll do the same for both parties.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I want to acknowledge the Kingitanga and King Tuheitia, the mana whenua of Ngāti Wairere and Ngāti Tōpū Kirikiriroa, Honourable Mayor Andrew King. Grateful for this opportunity. So, as announced, I represent our neighbourhood basically and surrounded areas. We were grateful in November that we got given the opportunity to give feedback with regards to the development of Gilbass Avenue and Quinton Drive. As you can see, we had a substantial amount of support and also raised concern which has been expressed in the documents that you have before you. A couple of key concerns was with regards to the access on Gilbass Avenue. Since then, there's been a removal of the home from Gilbass Avenue and the development has been reconsidered of coming off Quinton Drive, which was one of our proposals for the developer. So we acknowledge that they have taken that into consideration and that's been beneficial with the feedback. However, with regards to the recent feedback, they asked us to give feedback on the changes. However, we weren't privy to the changes that are documented today. So we would have asked if we could have had clear information with regards to the feedback, the opportunity for us to do it correctly. So such things as the reduction of homes, the access. The original plan that was presented wasn't too clear on with regards to the intent of Allison Road. So representing the neighbourhood, Allison Road also comes off that. There was a line drawn, but it wasn't clear the intent of the access needed for the development. So we would have some concerns with that, representing that neighbourhood, that access to go there. And it's more through with regards to the thoroughfare traffic and the type, well, I don't want to use the type of homes that will be there, but with regards to the affordability, I'll use that reference or that term of homes that have been proposed to develop. So we would be concerned to have access. We don't want the SHA, the SHA, to be used as a way to remove the Resource Management Act and to be swept under the carpet. We do want to acknowledge that previously that there has been proposals to develop this area and they have been turned down. So for whatever reason they have been turned down in the past, I'm not 100% sure, privy to that information, but we would be concerned about that also. So with regards to the development, we are concerned about the water, the excess water that accumulates in the proposed area and its runoff effect onto the adjoining or neighbouring homes. We would be concerned that the treatment of that, it's documented that this land has peat and will need some treatment to cure and to develop it correctly. We're more concerned about the runoff effect that it will take onto Hastings Place and onto the neighbouring homes onto Gilbass Avenue. So with that there, we need to discuss that more. The design of the homes, again, sort of a question mark with regards to the term and reference of affordability. So I guess that's what I need to present today on behalf of the neighbourhood. But just one more request with regards to the boundary. Currently right there, there's the old type of stock fencing with the old barbed wire. We would request that at least a 1.8 metre fence line is put up for around the surrounding homes.
Stop the clock while staff get up a picture on the wall of the site or guide us to it in our books so that we can then talk specifically to this confusion or whatever it is on the
293 is the book.
on the actual access, whether it comes off Gilbass or where it comes off, or you can talk us through on that page 344 if you want to.
344, sure. So this is the original plan where they had 35 Gilbass Avenue on page 345. Is that the one we're referencing? 445. So that is now removed from the original plan, from this revised plan. However, it's with regards to the line drawn down Allison Ave that connects to Allison Ave, it's more of the intent of that, but also that is a access road to that home on Allison. So they would actually be co-sharing that with whatever the plans are.
So could staff, Paul, could you explain exactly these, is the picture we've got, is the picture we've got here that comes off Gilbass Ave, is this what's happening? Was this what's proposed to happen, or is there a new map which...
The map in front of you, the PowerPoint, so that's the red edge of the site that we're considering today. So there was originally the first plans put forward by the applicants showed number 36, I think it was, Gilbass Avenue also being part of that site. 35. 35, sorry. But they've, in response to feedback that we received, decided to change the access so it comes off Quinton Drive. So we're not looking at any access way through to Gilbert Avenue, vehicle or pedestrian to Gilbert.
So where is that? Which map is that?
If you
That
look
we've
at
got?
294, it has the updated site, which 294 is a good example. It has the subject site, but also has the names of the roads involved as well with the access points.
So in our research, we found that Quinton Drive actually was a paper road. It's existing on our council plan, so that's why our proposal for them to utilise that is there rather than creating a thoroughfare through 35. Oh, sorry.
So, Paul, is that a 3 metre driveway or?
Just to be clear, the Allison Drive link that you're seeing now on the big screen, that's only proposed to be pedestrian access only.
That one there?
Yeah.
And then the other entrance is off through here.
Off Quinton, yeah.
Yep.
But that also is a existing drive to take you to that lot in the far corner there, into that, to their home. So
Correct. It's a shared access way for those existing properties.
that would be a concern. That's how they get into their home.
Okay. Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
The current, just remind me, the current zoning of the proposed
It's industrial.
industrial, so what kind of industry could you put there?
A whole range, light industrial, warehousing.
Yeah.
There's zone restrictions on what they can do at night
So
times.
from the point of view of neighbouring residents, you know, this is a genuine question, do you think you're better off with industrial right on your back doorstep, so to speak? As
No,
against
we don't
another
oppose the housing development straight off the bat. So we don't oppose the housing.
Yeah.
So, you know, we see that as a national plan, so we don't oppose that at all.
Yeah.
It was more with regards to the increased traffic that would cause on 35 if that was opened up.
And I can understand that, and that's to be with it. The problem I have, so I'm being upfront with you, as against I'll be with the developers and staff, is the issue of, as it's currently designed, it seems to me that the people who live there are utterly isolated from the lake and the surrounds from a pedestrian, you know, footway. If I'm a person with a,
Yeah,
you know,
but that was seen as an attraction for the homeowners that were buying into that neighbourhood, was actually purposely because it's enclosed, you know, so you actually have to go to Gilbert for a purpose. Is that your point?
well, the point is just what would be, I guess I'll be asking the developers and our staff is what is reasonable pedestrian cycleway access to the lake and to the surrounding neighbourhood, because as it's currently constricted, it seems it's like it's totally isolated. You can only vehicle it off Kaikatea Drive. I get that, and I can probably see the reason for that. But I'm just wanting to explore.
The cycleway goes on to Kahikatea, so you can access the parks via that. The cycleway goes
do you have a concern? Would you have a concern if that development was? Do you have a concern around pedestrian cycle access from the Gulbass Allison area to that area? You know, in terms.
Correct, and the new feedback that was given, the second feedback opportunity, actually raised that concern to if they wanted to open up 35 and just keep it as a pedestrian or a cycleway, that kind of thing, the residents are very hesitant with that.
Why are they hesitant?
Well, because of what is actually the potential that could come through. So if you look at history of industrial sites and residents blended with it, what would be attracted? And so that would be the concern, the increase of crime, the increase of, you know, that kind of attraction.
Because so that would be your. Could that be mitigated? Because it just seems to me you've got a total enclosed residential that has no access to the surrounding neighbourhood by foot or pedestrian.
And it's just for the new development you're referring to?
New development, yeah.
Yeah, so the new developments, that's why we propose that they come off Quinton Drive so they have access. It's a traffic light that's there that can control traffic.
I can understand for traffic, you know, vehicular, but I just want to explore a bit more what your objection is to pedestrian and cycle. So if you live in that area, you just go through Gilbert out onto Innes Common or up to Allison Street or whatever, you know.
Yeah, we're
Not
very
about
hesitant
vehicle.
with, you know, for a thoroughfare and for additional access, because to get to the parks, you can go down Allison Road or you can go down the cycle path to get to the lake. So they're not cut off from getting to those areas, they're there.
So just in summary, you have no problem with, well, you acknowledge residential development, but it's just going to be the impact on your immediate neighbourhood as against...
Well, the developer's already removed 35 off the plan, so we have acceptance of that.
And you wouldn't support 35 being used for cycleway
Not at
pedestrian access?
No.
And what's your position on the narrow alleyway up to Allison Street?
Again, the residents that expressed in our first meeting their concern having that, because it's a driveway for them to get into their home.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah. Do you feel that the better outcome for the overall city, if you were looking at it from an overall city point of view, would be better off with the... If you weren't living in that area and you were just looking at this as purely a residential subdivision...
Well, that's the argument.
At the moment, we're pushing all these cars out into a heavily industrialised area with no other residential off that road at all. Whereas if it came in off Gilbass, it's coming in off an appropriate another residential area.
Understand that. So if I can just, a little bit of history, that there was actually development for 2 sites there, the Jack's Homes and also for that site. So previously that was designed to actually be all residential. So, you know, that possibly could be on the plan in the future. So I guess what we're concerned about is that increase of traffic that will come through that thoroughfare.
Okay. So it's about traffic movements, is your concern, right?
Well, you know, if you look at the corner of 24 Gilbass Avenue, it's actually at the top of that screen. It's quite sharp and quite narrow. So if you've got cars parked along there on there, it's be difficult to manoeuvre. And the previous plan was 57 homes. That was an increase of 2 vehicles per house, 115 cars, multiply that twice a day. You know, so it's a huge increase from the current usage.
Okay. Councillor Ryan?
I understand you're against the vehicle, opening up another vehicle way. Are you also against an alleyway or cycleway?
Well, the plan had changed to not remove 35, to keep it as an existing home.
Right.
So through the feedback, we gave feedback positive towards that.
So you're okay with an alleyway, cycleway?
No, we didn't. If they were, so in our new feedback, so there was one in November, one last month. So the one last month indicated that they didn't want any additional access onto that.
So for cycles, anything, walking, residents would have to go right out to the main road or to get to Allison Street and round, is that right?
Yeah, it's about 300 metres.
Okay, thank you.
And can I just clarify that, Councillor Ryan, the 3 metre access out onto Allison Street it will be open for cycles and pedestrians, that's correct, isn't it? But not cars.
That's on there. That's on this plan currently. Yeah.
Okay, Ryan? Yes.
Okay.
We're just raising the concern on behalf of the neighbours that it's people accessing the shared driveway.
There is currently a planned accessway. You're opposed to that accessway, is that correct?
Yeah, representing the neighbourhood.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so just to be really clear, the long skinny driveway out onto Allison Street, you're okay with that for pedestrians and cycles?
No, we actually opposed to
You're
that.
opposed to that?
Yeah.
And your issues on water was just to make sure that the water that was generated on the site stayed on the site? So
Yeah,
that there was
the top left-hand corner in that red box, all of that is indicated as water
Yep.
Containing area. It's more that what flows onto that surrounding neighbourhood we'll be concerned, because we don't want it to increase what they're currently receiving. So that's what we'll be concerned about.
So if the water was to stay on site and they were to do a water management plan where it was to stay on site, the only other concern you've got is that pedestrian and cycleway out onto Ellison Street. You don't have any other concerns?
Correct.
Great. Okay. Any other questions, members? All right, thank you very much for your presentation.
Now, is Mr. Holbrook and Mr. Gunn.
Hello again, thank you for your time, councillors, Mayor. See, I'll just, if I can, respond really quickly to a couple of points that was raised by the submitter that we've just heard, and then I'll pass on to Leonard to give the formal statement. Just in terms of the connection back to Ellison Street, just to be really clear about what that is and how we got to the point that we proposed a pedestrian connection through there. That was a result of some discussions with council staff at the end of last year when they first received our first concept plan for it, and they said that was something that they would like us to provide if we could. And also some discussions with NZTA. It was something that they said they would quite like to see in the plan as well. So whilst we've put that there, it certainly would be a nice to have in terms of connecting the development across to Ellison. You know, we're open to, you know, what we do with that land. Just to be clear about the ownership of that land as well, it is a right of way, so it's made up of 2 strips. There's about 3 metres owned by Foster's, and there's another 3 metre strip beside it, and they share rights over each other's land. And there's, I believe, 4 properties that sort of share over that common land. But in terms of the red line which you see on that plan there, it is a strip of land that runs down to Ellison, which forms part of the site. It is their land. So it's available there to utilise for potentially, if we can navigate through this, pedestrian linkage, but it's not essential, and it's something we will certainly look at in terms of the next phase of the development in terms of going through the QD stage. The second point I'd just like to make is just around stormwater. Absolutely dealt with on site. That's a no-brainer. We will be designing a solution to deal with not only the stormwater that's generated from the development, but also dealing with that known flood hazard as well. So the solution that we put in place will deal with those 2 things, and the design of those are to ensure that they don't impact on other properties. So that's the way those things work. So we've done some work in respect of what that solution might look like, and the reason we did that work now was to have an idea of how that might impact on the yield of this, because when we go to gazetting stage, you've got to give the minister an indication of how many houses you're likely to build, so we wanted to have an understanding of that. So we've had a bit of a look at that, shown an area which we think will work, but again, this next phase will be to tie that down. So I just wanted to comment on those 2 things which related to the previous submitter. Leonard.
Thanks, Bevan. Right, Mayor, councillors, thank you. So for us to develop, I guess we responded to the expression of interest that the City Council put out around the special housing area. You know, it's social housing or community housing or just housing in general is a high interest area around Hamilton at the moment. The site's currently zoned industrial under the Hamilton Operative District Plan, and we actually already have a consent to subdivide the 2 hectare site into smaller industrial sites to realise value of it. That's the easy use. What we've trying to respond to is the right use, because it's actually in a location which is close to the District Health Board, it's close to the lake, and it's close to the Hamilton CBD, whether you're walking, cycling, driving. Originally we proposed an access off Gilbert Ave, but we listened to the concerns of the residents and we've removed that, and we do not own that site, and have now changed the access to be off Quinton Drive, extending to the north, with, as we've just discussed, the pedestrian link off Allison Street. Excuse me. The revised proposal necessitated a change to the plans just described, and I guess the second round of feedback was significantly less than the first round, where there was a lot of responses back, particularly around the transport through Allison Street. The revised concept plan has also provided an area on site to treat the stormwater, as Bevan's mentioned, and we'll continue to work with council to get the right number of dwellings on the site that suits the stormwater and the transport locations. The SHA proposes a mixture of 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings to respond to the market, with section sizes ranging from 200 square metres to 500 square metres. Foster's has partnered with Golden Homes, Holler Homes and Anthem Homes, and the homes, I'm a part of that business, to build the dwellings. And it's actually a JV where they have an ownership in the land as well, which incentivises them to get on and do the job. So I've tried to pull together, sort of connect and convene the right parties to deliver in what is a resource-constrained market, solutions quickly if we can get this across the line. Our responses and the purpose of the SHA is to increase housing supply and improve housing affordability. And we believe that in conjunction with these build partners just mentioned, we can deliver the 2 and 3 bedroom houses within the Kiwi Build outcomes once they're defined. We've been working on trying to get an average land value of around $225,000 per section, which leaves $275,000 to build the housing solution and develop it up. You know, it's tight, but it's achievable. I guess it's achievable out of working in partnership with getting the right solution around yield and other costs that are associated with this. We're committed to bringing the houses to market as quickly as possible, because the need is actually as quickly as possible, and that's what this process is all about, is going through a good process, but a process that streamlines to get to a good solution. We'd originally aimed to start the construction on the 1st of October 2018, or this year, but given there's a bit of process to go yet, it's more likely that construction will commence beginning of 2019. Sorry, to read this stuff too.
It's very similar in terms of...
It's boring.
You don't have to. Okay. There's some work to be done on a SOI, that's basically it.
We'll work with you on the SOI. Yeah.
We'll get there.
Don't say anything else.
Sorry, this is probably not appropriate. We'll work with Council SOI. There's a commitment there around the 40% of housing units to be affordable. And I guess as part of that, the partners we've got involved are actually people that are associated with me in other aspects, who actually have a community-minded approach to these things. Probably the main challenges, and not dissimilar to the ones with Porters, is just the scope of the SOI and the requirement to upsize infrastructure for more than just the development, and that's a discussion that we can have through the process. I guess the conclusion is that Foster Development's build partners, we've got the resources and we're motivated to get into it and deliver this. It's an opportunity for the Hamilton City Council to lead in the process and get ahead of Tauranga in terms of actually going through a process with the SHA and the Kiwi Build solution. As I say, we've got the resources and we've got the ability and will to make it happen quickly. We support the recommendation outlined to Council to delegate authority to the Chief Executive to finalise and sign the Statement of Intent, negotiate and sign a private developer agreement, confirm the proposal's needs, meets the criteria of Section 16 of the Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas Act, and make the recommendation to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development to gazette the site as an SHA. I guess underpinning it is actually a partnership approach. You know, we're keen to work with Hamilton City Council. We can, in terms of as it is a development, you do a development to make money. Actually, the industrial one for us is the easy solution, as I said at the front end. Actually, for us, this is the right solution to respond to what the community needs at the moment. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
G'day, Leonard. Right, so just can you please give me some clarity around that the cycleway again, that shared driveway? You talked about the 3 metre strip. So you've got 3 metres. The neighbours who use that driveway have got 3 metres. is it current? It's being used. The whole thing's being used as a shared driveway, is it? Or?
The whole thing currently is a shared driveway, yes.
Right. So what would it physically look like? Would you be going down and cutting off half of that? Or?
It wouldn't change at all.
All right. So it would be a driveway.
Would provide an access point to that, and people would cycle or walk through
Right.
that to access the lake and the hospital and the CBD.
Yeah. Cool. So with the entranceway now being proposed to be off Quentin Drive, just a couple of questions on that one. At that stage, there is no Quentin Drive. It's paper road. Who do we build that? Do we? Or?
No, we build that.
Oh, that's nice of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are you aware that just recently, I think in Councillor O'Leary's committee, we talked about nighttime parking down there, and we're just putting up signs as we speak on basically no parking down Quentin Drive at night time because of the trucks that go down there?
Yeah, I saw the public consultation for that.
Yeah. So how does that affect things for you guys?
From what I see, and I'm not sure what the actual decision was, but the papers that went out said that it was okay if people were using it to access property, and they had a reason to be going down there. So clearly, a resident would have a reason to be going down there.
Yeah.
I think the intent of the legislation was to stop people lingering and hanging out down there and for no good reason. So I guess our view is that any resident that was heading home, they've got a reason to access the property.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of those sort of controls and making that a nice, safe environment, our view probably is that that was a good bit of work the council did.
Okay, great, thank you. And my next question is, with my rubbish and recycling hat on, are you going to use goose fat or Vaseline to smear on the side of the trucks to squeeze in between those houses?
And that's something that we're having a discussion with council staff at the moment about. There's some issues in other parts of the city around turning of refuse trucks, so we're going to work on that.
Okay, can you give me some assurance? Oh, no, I'm not saying you won't, but can you tell me what sort of work you're looking at?
We might have to widen the road corridor or provide some turning areas or something to make it work. But what I'm saying is we will be looking at as part of the design through the next phase is how rubbish trucks are going to turn around for sure.
Right, because they're very, very narrow streets, aren't they?
Yep.
Right, so how are you aware of the, sorry, last question, I know we're short on time, but the behind the new shops out by Crosby Road down there, is that what the sort of size of the street we're talking about down there?
Yeah, well, that's what this original concept has used as a bit of a yardstick, I guess.
Yep.
So I think they were 11 and 15 metre wide roads. We've in recent weeks we've been talking with staff about what the road solution might look like. But it's a little bit of chicken egg. We've got the next phase is to refine this and get a concept plan together that we're actually going to build.
Yep.
But you sort of no point doing that until you get over this hurdle in terms of getting gazetted, I guess. So there's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet.
So have you considered a communal bin bay? Because if we do move to the wheelie bins, for example, a place where they could all take their bins to.
We can consider that.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
The access to Allison Street, did I hear you right? You were open to not having that?
It was something that we were asked to consider by council staff and by NZTA. So what we've done is we've indicated a willingness to allow that to happen if that's what. So
if that Allison Street accessway was removed, how many metres would it be to walk to the lake and the in its common area? Because obviously this theoretically is close to that huge green area, as is the rest of the neighbourhood. This becomes different then. This becomes totally isolated.
Yep, I guess there's a couple of ways that you could access. One would be to walk down Quinton and around Bunnings and back up.
Through an industrial area, back in cars. I'm thinking of mum with pushchair, pram, someone like myself in 40 years' time on a motor scooter thing.
Even now.
Mobility. So I'm just trying to visualise. This is really street level stuff. If you're living there, and you're a pedestrian and a cyclist and on a motor scooter, mobility scooter, what does that then look like?
So if I can speak to that, I guess originally we did have an access off Gilbert Ave, and so therefore it wasn't really required. Actually, now that we don't have access off Gilbert Ave for transport, for a connection, it is actually a whole lot more important, and yes, we would look to keep it there.
Well, the issue then, okay, describe that access to Allison. How wide is it and who are you sharing it with?
It's 6 metres wide and it's shared with 4 other houses.
And so there'd be sort of cars competing?
Cars competing?
Well, I'm saying if you're a cyclist pedestrian, you would share it with vehicles as well.
Yep.
It's effectively, Leonard, it's a driveway at the moment, isn't it?
It's a shared driveway, so 6 metres wide.
Yep, so it's wider than an average driveway.
Yep.
So I can understand the issue of traffic through Gilbert Avenue, right? What I cannot understand is what this development now looks like, because it seems kind of a ghetto. It seems utterly isolated from the surrounding neighbourhood, and it seems to me that the pedestrian cycle footway, mother with pushchair and a pram, access to the Innes Common Lake area, the whole green space, Gower Park, seems essentially difficult.
Yeah, look, it's part of the process. We need to unpack exactly what that would look like.
Well, you see what I mean? The rest of the neighbourhood's integrated, right? Even other off Kaikatea Drive, but it seems to me that primarily, if you bought a section here, you would have to walk through, go through an industrial area, or go up a steep, narrow driveway which you share with vehicles to Allison Street. This is the problem I have, is about the pedestrian cycleway access. So wouldn't you have thought, and I'm respectful of the local neighbours' problems and objections, I note that, but wouldn't you have thought some form of pedestrian cycle access to Gilbert Avenue, which is not going up a hill, which is, and then just joining the footpath off to the Thinners Common, would have been a better outcome?
Well, it's something we can look at as we go through the process in terms of an outcome.
Deputy Mayor,
yep.
Could I suggest that these questions would be better directed at
staff?
I will.
Can I just have
outside of the 20
one
minutes?
little question?
The reason was
sure.
Staff in NZTA were the ones who suggested this went in here, and these guys made it clear they're flexible. So I think it's a staff issue.
No, and can you just give us an idea? What is the rough cost of if you were a house, and is this looking at purchasing social housing? Just fine-tune me, if you would, in terms of what this the category of people this is
price points
targeted.
Price points limited for the housing.
The price points. I guess personally, my objective is to try and get $500,000 as the price point for a new 3-bedroom house. And
that would be open then on the market for private owners.
We're talking with the Kiwi Build CEO, I think, yes.
Sure.
Neville, about the process around that, and the expression of interest came out for that 2 days ago. So we're working through that process to submit.
Would that would be kind of, I hate to use it, young couples first home with young kids?
So I'll respond to that. So if it's subject to Kiwi Build, it'll be to first home buyers, and it will be to second chance buyers as well. Sorry? First home buyers and second chance buyers, those people that effectively no longer have a house, fallen on hard times, remarried or so forth, and can prove to the government that there's a certain income limit they cannot achieve, they may be eligible to Kiwi Build. But we don't manage that, and neither would Leonard. The government has set standards behind that. They already have some frameworks existing within Housing New Zealand policy in that extent as well. They have to own it for 2 years and whatnot.
No, so that's helpful, and I'll have other questions for our planners. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I, just before we go on to the next member, can I just qualify 3 bedrooms, how many bathrooms? What, 1, 1.5, 2?
I'd have to...
You don't know yet?
No.
Is there a garage?
Yes.
So it'll have a garage, and you're not sure about the bathrooms?
We've got to go through the process, yes.
Yeah.
At least one, no, I didn't.
At least one bathroom, that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
Councillor Gary, I've got to limit you to 2 minutes, sorry, because I've got to get this wrapped up within 20 minutes.
Just who are your neighbours? Who are your direct neighbours? So looking at this in our agenda, looking to the right-hand side, is that Jack's house?
Jack House Transit.
Movers, whatever they call
yes.
it, okay. And on the other, so looking at what I'm looking at, the left-hand side of the subject site, those are just houses, are they? When I say just houses, those are residences.
It's an industrial activity.
No, he's got it up round there.
Which way are you holding your plan?
So what's there?
The driveway's like a chimney.
Can you see that?
Oh, Gilbass is residential, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, obviously, yep.
Thank you. So, sorry if I said, Arama is, where is he still here? Oh yeah, you're representing those people, is that right?
Yeah, so Gilbass Avenue goes into Remington and then down into Hastings Place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's got these ones.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Leonard.
Councillor Leo.
Looking at the proposal, this will be basically like Queen's Ave by the railway station, would that be about right? The development down there, the small development?
Yeah, those lots in Queen's Ave are around about 300 square metres, I believe. So
these are going to be smaller?
Some of them will. It'll be common, similar to what's happening with duplex development around the city at the moment. So they are, the duplexes sit on 200 square metres. plus, so it'll be somewhere between a sort of duplex right through to about 500 square metres, so bigger than what's in Queen's Avenue.
Okay. Jack House Transit, they'll still be there?
It's probably a commercial question that I probably can't answer at this stage. Yep.
Because they operate at night time, you realise that? Yep. I went down there the other day, and tell you the truth, Quentin Drive is pretty hard to negotiate through there, even during the daytime. You know, you got trucks, you got every damn thing in there, and it's a bit of a nightmare to get through there, to tell you the truth. So, good luck.
Thanks.
Do you need luck?
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. That's great. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The floor is yours. Just take questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy, if members are happy to take the report as read, with the obvious changes to the staff recommendation in section 2, just to pick up on council seeing a final PDA when it gets past the Gazette stage and comes in as a QD, and subsection 2E, which just outlines when we say 40% affordable, again, much like the previous report, tying it back to the Kiwi Build criteria.
So just a question from myself, just to clarify, we're still to work through the infrastructure requirements specifically with this PDA, similar to the working through with the previous one as well, aren't we?
Yep, correct.
Yep.
I mean,
so that's the stormwater issues that were addressed earlier, as
Yep.
well as the transport issues. Is there anything specifically you want to talk about in terms of stormwater?
No, I mean, I think, look, this is a challenging site, to put it mildly. You know, it's in a flood hazard area, high peat soils, high groundwater table. I think in the recommendation, the applicants originally came in with a much higher yield. So one of our purposes is to put that filter, that realism filter on what is actually achievable based upon our infrastructure advice. So you'll see the recommendation actually says a minimum of 15 is looking like it's possible on this site. That protects two reasons. That protects us from not agreeing a yield which is, quite frankly, unattainable. But also, if it gets to the minister and we put a yield at, say, 50, and then subsequently at PDA stage, all the infrastructure shows that they need wider roads or they need on-site storm attenuation, then if the yield actually goes down, they can't apply at consent stage under the HASHO Act because they wouldn't be meeting the yield. So we've deliberately lowered the yield because our expectation is you're looking at a lot less on that site given all the mitigation that they have to do.
So the actual yield will be determined prior to the PDA being finalised, yes?
Yeah, but in order to apply under HASHO, they have to have at least 15, which is in the recommendation.
Absolutely. So I'm just letting councillors know they will have an opportunity to discuss and debate the yield versus the constraints of infrastructure around stormwater and transport at that point in time, won't they?
Through the PDA discussion,
yes, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
So the intended beneficiary is theoretically under the Kiwi Build, first home, start, second as the chief. I get that. Is this, I mean, as I see this development, well, first of all, can you just, if it wasn't residential, what type of industrial could you put there?
Well, it's, as you say, it's an industrial site. It's got an area around the interface with the residential, which is an amenity protection overlay.
Of course,
so that controls the bulk and scale. So you don't want a big, ugly box right next to your residential garden. But yes, I mean, an industrial zone, you can, again, much like the area to the west of the site, that could be a whole range of light industrial uses. It could be wholesale retail, yard-based retail. It could be warehousing. There's
panel beaters, that type of stuff, light industry, panel beaters.
Panel beaters, yeah, that's
mechanics.
All. That could all.
But you wouldn't get a dairy goat type. You wouldn't get a dairy goat type factory.
Heavy industrial wouldn't be. On that.
The light industrial warehousing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
So the other problem I have is it just seems to, as it's currently designed, let alone if you remove the shared access way up to Allison Street, it is. I'm not sure what word I'm using, it seems utterly isolated from the surrounding neighbourhood. So if I'm driving, I have to get there, I have to drive through an industrial area, and albeit that intersection is traffic light controlled, so the access relative to traffic and time of day probably is not any worse than Crescent Court and some of the other streets at Tawa Street that come into Kaikatea. I kind of get that. But it seems an issue that not only are you doing vehicular, but basically if you know, a young mother with a pram wants to go for a walk and wants to take the child to Innes Common, she's going quite or she or he, whoever the caregivers, is going quite a long way to get there. And yet the rest of the neighbourhood, if you take my point, if I look at all of that right across, not just Gilbis, but you know, the whole neighbourhood off around Gower Park, they seem to be part of an integrated neighbourhood where they can walk up this street and that street and get to these places. This one, you see what I'm trying to drive at, seems utterly isolated.
And look, from a professional planning point of view, we listened to feedback and the Gilbass Avenue vehicular access was changed and applicants listened to that. So they came in with another proposal with a pedestrian-only access onto Allison. My view would be, at the very least, you'd want to keep that because otherwise you are creating a very isolated cul-de-sac site. So if you're not having vehicular access onto Gilbass Avenue, you really do need a secondary pedestrian access, and the applicants are showing today that they're going to look at that Allison Street access. I think you'd need to keep that. Vehicular access onto Quentin, that's the preferred access point from NZTA. But you'd also need...
But from their, just in a one sentence, why is that their preference as professional designers, engineers?
I don't know the detail. Maybe one of my colleagues in the infrastructure team might be able to fill in the blanks, but the NZTA preferences from an efficiency point of view, the signalisation that's recently gone in at Kahikatea, rather than taking an intensification of traffic through the existing residential environment at Gilbass. So they think the road environment is set up better onto Kahikatea. There still need to be the full ITAs submitted at QD stage, but the preference is Quentin Drive, as they've now amended their plans to show.
And I think I can understand that because Gilbass is a residential street, slow street, you know, the whole deal. But what I'm really having problems now, the access to Allison Street, what will that look like? Because what I'm hearing is it's a shared driveway.
Yeah, I mean,
and what is its gradient? What is its slope?
I've walked it a few times. I mean, it's you could do a pushchair on there. It's not a Swiss style gradient there, but you could have a shared drive, much like you have shared streets, and there's only 4 to 5 private properties sharing an access of there, so they could retain those existing properties, their vehicular access, and then, you know, if the applicants were to vest an adjoining pathway for people coming out of that proposal. So we're not talking, the number of cars using that would only be the ones that are using it at the moment, and then the pedestrian access would be alongside.
What's this gradient? That sounds so...
No, I'm just saying, it's not particularly steep. We're not talking sort of alpine
So you could do
a
mobility scooter?
I'm not an expertise on how fast the mobility scooters can go, but I wouldn't say the gradient is unacceptably steep for a pedestrian access way.
Because I think with respect, that's a detail. I mean, if we're doing disability friendly, we're doing old person friendly, and most importantly, we're doing, you know, pushchair, young mums with kids and dads with kids going to the lake. What's the problem? And I'm tuning into the neighbours' concern with the Gilbass Avenue still having some form of pedestrian access to Gilbass, because that is flat and straight, and then the links across to Innes Common and the lake area seem much, much easier, and it seems more integrated. By that process, you're integrating this area with the rest of the broader neighbourhood?
I mean, that is a potential option. I've been advised by the applicant they potentially no longer have an option on the property that they would have used for that access point. So in the plans before us now, they've obviously shown the red edge that doesn't include that residential property onto Gilbass, so they'd probably struggle to get pedestrian access there, which is why Allison Street access is important. You could still get to the lake via Allison, except it's probably not as direct.
It's longer and steeper.
It's long and steeper, and I totally accept that.
I mean, okay, from a planning point of view, give me another example of a housing estate, you know, whatever, that is utterly isolated from its neighbourhood. Because I'm just trying to think through the whole city, roughly, you go from one street to another street, you go off parks, it is sort of all links, right? This one, you drive through, not only you drive through an industrial area to get there, right? So you've got no access from the surrounding neighbourhood. Then in addition, pedestrian-wise, it seems to me, and I'm really surprised they've given away that option, because actually, to me, I would have thought this council might have had some leverage. You know, what concerns me is the fait accompli. All right, fait accompli. So we're just rubber stamping something. What we're looking for is to get a win-win for the surrounding neighbours. Okay, so the question would be. Debate. Yep. The question is, can you give me another example in this city where a neighbourhood is absolutely, is basically isolated from the surrounding neighbourhood?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, there's a number of examples where you've got infill sections in brownfield environments where you are looking at using land efficiently, which will be behind existing residents.
Yes.
And there are examples, I would say, certainly in Rotorua and Flagstaff, where you do have very elongated cul-de-sacs serving residential development. Cul-de-sacs that seem to go on forever and a day. I quite often get lost in that part of town. But I totally accept permeability and good design of a site needs a good connection with the surrounding environment. Look, it's not a fait complete. This is why it's being discussed today, and it's for council to decide how important that access onto Gilbert Avenue is. I suppose in terms of what's before you now, it doesn't show a connection onto Gilbert Avenue because they haven't included that within their site application area. They're only now showing the access onto Allison, which, as I said, that would be an absolute minimum for me to have that access.
I'm asking you and your colleagues, as a professional planner, your trade, your profession, as this proposal is currently drafted with this narrow shared access up the hill to Allison Street, do you believe this gives us a good planning outcome given the people who are likely to live in this area?
If I was to ask, a good planning outcome for me would have, at a minimum, pedestrian access onto Gilbass and Allison Street. And I would also, in an ideal world, include a more holistic development of the site to the south, which is the Jack House transit site, if that ever became available.
Yes. And what is our ability, perhaps, to the Chief Executive to actually, because I just want to know, do we have the ability moving forward to, in consultation with our neighbours in Gilbert Avenue, obviously we want to get a good outcome for everyone, do we have that ability to try and negotiate an outcome involving, obviously, the Gilbert neighbourhood?
Council can pass a resolution for this to go back to the applicant to look at alternative options for access, but what's in front of us at this time is what we have to make a decision on now. Council can vote not to proceed at this stage to recommend it to the Minister, subject to exploring other accesses, but that's for Council to take a vote.
Would that endanger the project in terms of undue frustration? Or?
Well, it would delay the project, certainly, but you know, this is what this process is about, is to look at what's before you. If you think there's an alternative solution or it could be improved, then that's for debate.
Deputy Mayor, can I just interrupt you for a minute?
I'll save it for debate. I have some questions, but it's...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask either the General Manager or the Chief Executive to explain why we have ended up coming in off Quinton instead of off Gilbass and the reasons for it? Just cut to the chase to tell us what's happened so that... because we're digging ourselves a hole here.
So we've done some preliminary assessments on this. We've actually gone out to our traffic engineer, who's assessed that from a safety point of view, having the traffic flow out on a controlled intersection from Quinton on to Kirkatea is a better outcome than weaveling through a suburban streets and achieving it that way. Also, NZTA's preference is that it goes out through that access as well. So it's basically been a safety consideration. They believe that's the safer route than going up through Gilbass. So that's their independent assessment. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, I don't think the vehicular access is under any question. The preferred option is Quinton, which is why we've asked the applicants to do that, and also to take into account some of the feedback we've received from the residents and the speaker previous to this item. But I think where Councillor Gallagher's coming from is, could there be a second pedestrian access.
No, that wasn't what he was asking. Can you go again? Because
well, no, you see, my
think you
issue is,
misunderstood what he
so
was
I
saying.
get the transport thing, and that's the compromise, and I respect the Gilbert Avenue. What I'm not getting is it seems to me we're doing a housing development which is making it incredibly difficult for people who live there, first home buyers, to access and be part of an integrated neighbourhood. And it seems to me some kind of negotiated access, Gilbert is the twin one is a better outcome overall. And obviously there may be some law and order issues or concerns around security. I realise that can be discussed, negotiated. I respect that. But ultimately, if you only have one little narrow shed access to Allison Street, then this proposal starts to look a bit like a dog, to be honest. And I don't mean disrespect to my good friends, the developer, or not friends of mine, but you know, I want to make this happen. Trust me, I do want to make this happen, but I'm just really worried the council compromises for future people who live there when the minor alterations
Deputy
could
Mayor,
transform.
question, please.
The question, the Chief Executive, what could we do without undue delay to discuss further the issue of a sort of better pedestrian access,
So I don't think
without mucking up the project?
I don't think it necessarily has to cause undue delay, because if we're talking about principal outcomes from an SOI point of view. So as we're forming up the SOI, we'll reflect some aspect of that in there for consideration. And then when we get down to the nitty-gritty negotiation point at a later stage, we'll work that through. So we just have to have that conversation. I don't necessarily say it'll delay us, as long as we have it at a principled level.
Councillor Mark.
My question is, once we resolve how to get into it and out of it, are these the narrowest streets, and I'm not being glib, are these the narrowest streets in Hamilton, these 9-metre ones, or what?
In the proposed scheme?
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to answer whether they're the narrowest streets. I think certainly our infrastructure team have commented that they'd need to be wider than currently shown in the layout. So just to be clear, the layout as shown for this stage of the process will likely change because all those issues in terms of stormwater mitigation.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of the yield that the developer needs to get and to make the SHA, but I wonder how we get around. I mean, do the emergency services, for example, jolly great big fire engines and the likes, do they get a say in this as well?
Well, our infrastructure team would advise us, but they've already told us that the 9 metres would be too short.
Right.
So that's something that we'd discuss at QD stage to say, look, we'd be looking for at least a 15-metre wide access into this site for those reasons you've just said, fire appliances, on-street parking, bin storage. You generally need to go higher than that.
Yeah, the bin storage and the rubbish thing is an interesting one because it doesn't seem to be in much of a discussion in any of the SHAs I see. Is that a discussion you have, or do we need to give that some teeth in these?
Again, this is a balance between what we can discuss now, based upon what we know.
Right.
A lot of these technical details, just for brevity and to get this to the Minister, is very high level. Yeah. So at QD stage, when the typologies are known, when the affordability components are known, the layout is locked in at QD stage. Yeah. And that's when you have those detailed conversations. Okay. But not at this stage. The Minister's really not interested in where the bins are going at this stage.
All right, I appreciate that. Thanks, Paul.
Sure. Are you familiar with the village quarter?
Yep.
And the 9-metre roads down there?
Yep.
Just reminding members that there is another very similar subdivision in Hamilton right now. It's there, that's got this type of layout. So
discussing it, they are circular.
No, it's not. There's dead end. There's a dead end down there. Yeah, very long dead end right at the end, the very bottom row.
Mind you, like Paul said, that's a discussion for later anyway.
So just saying 15 metres is a very
big road.
It's a friggin' highway, you know.
Yeah.
So.
No, just trying to fit a truck in.
All right. It's a highway. It's not quite, but anyway. So we'll go now to. I'll move. Is there a seconder for the staff recommendation? Yep, Councillor Ryan. And there's no one speaking to it, so we'll go straight to the vote. We have a. Double jeopardy. Sorry.
I'm going to, on the current resolution, vote against it purely to wave a red flag. I'm not wanting to frustrate. But my role is to try to do everything I can to work with anyone that's going to make first home buying easier, to build the Kiwi dream, As currently presented, and I'm also totally respectful of the Gilbert Avenue neighbourhood in terms of the vehicular issue, and obviously would expect ongoing discussions around reasonable access. But the Kiwi dream, in my view, doesn't involve a young mum, a dad, during the day with a pushchair and a pram that is somehow living in a housing area that is utterly isolated, walled off from the surrounding neighbourhood. That is not my view of the Kiwi dream, and I think our respected planner at the end of the table told us what his professional idea would be, and obviously eventually it would be the Jacks Transit area, the whole wider neighbourhood, and hopefully I strongly suspect that will be part of the stage 2 of the development. And I respect that the compromise probably is the vehicular off Kaikatea Drive with the traffic light controlled intersection. But I don't think we should be into bad planning. And it just seems to me, and I'm also concerned that while there was an option on a property, I would have expected the developers to have kept options open, because this should be genuine negotiation where we achieve a win-win for everyone. Now, the first one is for the Gilbert Avenue neighbourhood and the lack of vehicle access. I get that. That's a win. But with respect, I really hate a situation where we have a neighbourhood that's suddenly sealed off from the broader neighbourhood. And these are good people trying to get in their first home. So I just don't think this is particularly good planning. And I probably will lose this vote today, but hopefully if my red flag encourages our excellent Chief Executive Officer to actually be mindful of those things, and I'm just wanting to get an outcome. At the very least, please ensure that access to Allison Street is a reasonable gradient and is safe and secure and, you know, positive. Well,
Deputy Mayor, would you be happy with an amendment to the...
I want the wording so that I don't want to unduly frustrate. Trust me, I'm wanting to be helpful, genuinely, just help me here.
An amendment along the lines of leaving the vehicle access open still for staff to be able to choose the best.
The pedestrian, you know, further work around pedestrian.
Make up your mind.
No, all I want is a alternative that staff further discuss alternative pedestrian cycle access.
We will do that without an amendment. That's already on the cards. We will do that. Yes. So, I mean, I'm getting, Paul, you're definitely writing that down as a note.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly part of the SOI, so we'd be encouraging access onto Allison, and we can...
Yeah, so it's covered, Deputy Mayor, but if you want a specific amendment...
Right, I just note that it be noted that staff will further discuss alternative pedestrian cycle access. Is that all right?
No.
No, because that's not what... He's talking about something different from what you guys...
Okay, so we're off different pages.
He's talking about Allison Street. He's talking about something onto Gilbert.
I'm talking about something onto Gilbert.
Okay, so we're not doing that. Okay, so if you want to put forward an amendment to that effect, I can draft something.
Yep.
Yes. I'll just that staff be asked to further investigate the possibilities of pedestrian cycle access onto Gilbert Avenue.
Could I just, sorry to interject, and just to be clear, we have to look at the subject site before us, so we can't require them to do something outside of the subject site.
Okay. So basically, what you can do, what you can do is work on the Allison Street.
Yes, we can.
So,
well, hang on now. I've got a question now, because when this came to us as a concept before, it did have something onto Gilbert.
I'm just going to... We're in the middle of debate and we shouldn't be asking for questions, so I'm just going to take a 5-minute break so that members can... so that you can talk amongst yourselves, get your heads around it. And so we'll be back at 3:05. started. I think everyone's here, aren't they? Gary's missing.
Gary's at the back.
Gary, where are you? sitting with the public. Okay, so with this, if my seconder, Councillor Hamilton, agrees, I'm withdrawing my motion. And are you okay with that, Councillor Ryan?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, what do you want to do?
I'll move that. I'll give my explanation as to why, and I'm just trying to get the right page because there's a map.
Get your report, Martin. Just,
Yeah, there's a map because basically.
can we have the map up on the screen?
Could we have the map up on the screen? I think it would be helpful.
Recommendation on the screen.
So hang on, just so Deputy Mayor, you're moving what was on the screen.
I'll move that.
Councillor Dave, are you seconding it?
2 through 4, yeah, I'll second it.
So I think it's the map on page 294, is that right? That map?
Come on,
294. Sorry.
Get your shit together, Martin.
Do you want the map up or the motion, Mayor Andrew?
The map. We've done the motion. So.
Map.
Basically, what I am. Right. If you. If you look at Innes Common, Gilbert Avenue actually does have a walkway access onto Innes Common, all right? And unfortunately, that's not the right map. I'm just trying to explain.
You've got the map. Yeah. He wants the map on page 294.
You've got it, I think.
No.
Yeah, 294.
That's not 294.
Yeah, 294, please.
It's got yellow on it.
Can we do that? I'm so sorry, but I think this is the relevant. I will explain where the cycleway. I'm sorry, I don't mean to confuse you, and it's not my intent. Yeah, 294, page 294. If you want to.
It goes through that way, and it goes through that way.
That's right. Yeah.
There's another one there.
I just want to explain this in terms of the broader neighbourhood.
There's one through there. There's one through there.
Yeah.
They've got two.
Yeah.
Two. Right, great, thank you, that's good. Now, if you just see from a planning point of view, you have Innes Common, you have the cycleway pedestrian way coming off the railway, opposite Lake Domain Drive, and you see there were two, there are two accesses from Innes Common. I'm just trying to build, as I understand it, across to Gilbert Avenue and also Hastings Place, right? So all I'm wanting is that we discuss with the developers in the neighbourhood the possibility of a cycle access that essentially would link to Gilbert and would then go straight up and through to Innes Common. That is a much better access point where the people who live in this area can enjoy the access to the surrounding green space neighbourhood, and it's more integrated with the neighbourhood. That's one thing. Two, as I understand it, the potential purchasers of this property are the first home buyers, and these are people, young couples and others who are being cleaned out. They go beyond a certain financial thing and then they leave auctions at this point. They're denied the opportunity. And second start. As I would understand it, this neighbourhood ideally should be totally integrated and integrative and part of the broader... Hang on,
you're in debate?
Yes.
Okay.
She's got it ahead of...
No, I'll just give my reason and then that's it. And I acknowledge that legally all we can do is discuss and negotiate. I get that. So I do not want to frustrate this development. Long term, one would see this development with the Jack's housing land area possibly expanding. I would also see that this is a better outcome environmentally for the neighbours than having a large warehouse wall right slap bang from their back lawn, if you take my point. I think this is... I would assume that if I was living in Allison Street, Gilbert, I'm better off potentially with the right development than I am that if there's a further expansion of the industrial with light warehousing, workshops, panel beaters, mechanic shops and all of that going right to my, to the buffer, and then I look on that. I look on a big high warehouse wall, all right?
So what I am trying to do is, if you like, is effect a compromise, and the compromise is this: we accept that no extra traffic in that neighbourhood, but all we're saying as a council with the developer in the neighbourhood is we do believe that pedestrian and cycle access to the neighbourhood and to Innis Common Lake areas should be better than it's currently forecast, with a very narrow access up Allison Street. Now, if in the end, for whatever reason, this particular option doesn't fly, for whatever reason, then trust me, I will be absolutely zeroing in on a good option up to Allison Street. Okay, so I realise that we are purely in negotiation phase to get an outcome. I also respect that we must also involve the neighbourhood in these kind of discussions so that we do try and achieve an overall win-win for everyone. But if we as a council, we have a responsibility also to the people who are going to potentially live in this particular new neighbourhood. And as I said, final word, I do not in any way wish to frustrate this project. I want to be as helpful as possible, but I just want a win-win outcome.
Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I just totally want to reinforce what Deputy Mayor Doc Martin's saying. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm entirely supportive of it, and credit Leonard and the team. But yeah, if both access ways get cut off, it's like cutting off a major artery. It's like giving the new subdivision or new site asthma. It's trying to cope with only one ability to breathe. And I think the surest way to isolate and create a slum would be to have the neighbouring community turn their back on that development, which is effectively what they'd be doing. So I think those, at the very least, the breather to, I call it a breather, the alleyway, the access to Allison Street is really a non-negotiable. I don't know the logistics of it. It's a 6 metre wide thing. I know in Rototuna we've got, I used to live there, there's alleyways between the streets, and they're all 6 foot fencing. It's private, it's secure, so I don't know if potentially in that shared space there can be an alleyway developed. I respect the need for privacy with the neighbours and some concerns about new neighbours moving in, but I think those things can be addressed and mitigated in an aesthetically pleasing way. But yeah, certainly to take Martin's points with regard to the community, balloons over Waikato, all those things, they would be completely shut off by isolating or eliminating those little alleyways and nooks. So yeah, I'll be very supportive of that also.
Just so there's no confusion, Allison Street was always going to happen. It's the second walkway we're talking about. Councillor Dave.
Nevertheless, Councillor Ryan's arguments were quite sound, because I think there's no point setting up a housing area, whether it's a special housing area or any other form of subdivision, to become an isolated ghetto, Nappy Valley type of thing. And I think if you've got, if you've got one point of access, look at some. If you've got the Google Maps, look at some of the little lanes like Silkwood and that, just along the road going the opposite way of Kakatea Drive. They're terrible little enclaves because they've got no way out except onto a state highway, and it's really difficult to get in there. It's not a salubrious neighbourhood at all, to be honest. It's sort of rather ironic when I'm thinking of the community opposition to access through Gilbass Ave. You look, Gilbass Ave, as Martin said, has got access as of right direct onto Innis Common. Hastings Place has got access as of right onto Innis Common. Remington Drive has. All the other streets around there, we've ensured when we're doing our planning that they have that access. So what Martin is suggesting here is there should also be a much more serious look at access of the sort that originally came to us in a concept, which I guess was for the owners there to buy a property on Gilbass Ave have at the bottom of it so that you could get access through. Now he's suggesting that that be not car access, just cycling and walking. That can hardly be damaging for the locals there. And if they think it is, then I think they need to think of the wider community and not just their own properties, because they all have access right alongside other residential areas through to Innes Common. So Martin's actually not suggesting anything more than what the locals in Gilbass and Hastings and Rimington already have ×2. So it's a very bad urban design principle if you shut off that sort of access, like we have in some parts of the city in the past. St James and Tawa Street come to mind.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. Look, I'll support it, knowing that it's not going to slow things down too much. I do have certain concerns. I don't quite share the worry about it being a ghetto. Firstly, because I've got a lot of confidence in Leonard and the team at Foster's, the kind of quality of stuff they build. Secondly, I'm drawing a comparison between this and the gated communities, if you like, the Sanctuary down off Thomas Road and the likes. They are completely cut off, and they seem to be very, very happy in there. Thanks very much. My concern is, as I have been sort of bleating on about all afternoon, is about the size, just the sheer size of it. And I am worried about Quentin Drive as a major road in, owing to the fact that we've had to just pass or change the laws so that you don't park in there, because now you're going past Bunnings, you're going past Jack's. Now I can imagine at a busy time and trying to get onto Kahikatea Drive, at a busy time trying to get an ambulance or a fire engine in there is a worry to me. But I'll look forward to seeing what happens, and we'll look forward to having those discussions when they come along.
Councillor Leo.
Look, I can't support this one because this is an industrial area. And the question I ask is, how many of these special housing areas do we need? Already this morning we've already had 2 before us, and there's a heap of houses going to go into those 2. Eventually, of course, we're always going to need industrial areas, so let's just leave things as they are.
Today, I think we have a rare and an interesting motion on the board. Deputy Mayor, you've created consternation for both the developer and the residents. We've got a developer now who may have to go out and buy another property worth $500,000 plus to get the walkway through. And we've got residents who've said, have a petition or have a group of people of 40 to 50 people who've said this is not the outcome they want. But I've got to say, this is about the bigger picture. Firstly, we're not locking it in today. We're going back to let staff come out with the best outcome. And secondly, this is about what's best for the bigger picture, for the greater community. And I do see the reasons why you put this motion. So I will be supporting it. Your right of reply, Deputy Mayor.
Word is consideration, and obviously that involves the incorporated society, which represents the neighbourhood as part of that discussion and negotiation. What I do want to achieve, however, is an outcome which is good for all concerned, and I would argue that if this housing development didn't go ahead, probably the area would be worse off with eventually big warehouse, large tin walls coming right up to that neighbourhood in future. So I think this potentially has a better outcome aesthetically, environmentally. But I think, and at the very least, I think what we are flagging with respect is that the Allison Street access is utterly no-go, and we want to make sure that that works. If we can affect pedestrian cycle access to the Gilbass area, in its common area, without undue disadvantage to the neighbourhood, and you know, we're trying to achieve a win-win. And I think, in fairness, I also want to say, not only allowing Quentin Drive as the vehicle access is a huge concession. Like Leo, I am deeply, deeply concerned that the only way people can get into this residential area is from Kahikatea Drive, and they have to drive through industrial area.
and I don't think that's ideal at all, but I guess it's a lesser evil if we can get a way that enables those first home buyers to get in and get a reasonable house. So I think with respect, there's a degree of compromise where in the end, roughly, everyone is essentially better off. I totally respect that all we can do is negotiate and have consideration. You know, we are quite constrained. I'd be saying to staff that if you don't work one thing, please come back and assure us that Allison Street will work. Okay.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote on this.
The motion is carried 6-4, 5 against.
We'll now go to item 9. Thank you, gentlemen, for presenting. So we're on page 384. Thank you, Blair.
Thank you, Council. So this report is just outlining a proposed pathway to review the special housing policy, the policy which guides the 3 applications you just had before you today. We're not actually putting forward today a change policy, more just outlining the principles which would underpin the policy review. And if I summarise those, it is the current SHA policy does not have any affordability criteria included in the policy. In saying that, you just had 3 applications where we are seeking affordable housing and certain levels to be delivered. What the proposal would be is that if we were to update our policy to align it with what the government is saying and what the government has been talking to Mayor Andrew and the Chief Executive around their thinking about affordable housing delivery, linkage to the Kiwi Bill criteria, and I guess reflecting those terms in our policy. At the same time, it would be helpful to demonstrate that to the development community that in return for the affordability criteria being specified in our SHA policy and as a key requirement of any SHA applications, that we acknowledge the more enabling consent pathway that the SHA policy and then I guess the qualifying developments provide compared to a standard RMA process. And so the report has outlined some principles that we'd wish to review the policy around. I would also just note that overnight the government released some expressions of interest for a period of 1 month for the first tranche of developers to apply for Kiwi Bill properties. Within those expressions of interest document, there is some talk about the Kiwi Bill price caps, and in the context of Auckland and Queenstown, they specify 3 tiers of pricing caps for affordable home based on the number of bedrooms. And they say for the rest of the country, which obviously includes Hamilton, it's a $500,000 cap in terms of an affordable home. They also say that they don't define the number of bedrooms, but they may do more work on that. The document also talks about the definition of an eligible purchaser. It talks about a first home buyer or a second chance purchaser. But there is, I guess, some information that's not in those expression of interest documents, which I'm looking for, which is how do you then test that they're a first home buyer or a second chance? Is that linked to the Housing New Zealand criteria? So there's some more work that I need to do with the team to go away and just hunt down some of that detail. But certainly the numbers that have been talked about, $500,000 for an affordable home in Hamilton, that is what the documents are referring to. And it would be our intention that our policy links to whatever the appropriate documentation is that the Kiwi Bill is described in. This particular document I'm looking at the moment is an expressions of interest document that lasts for 1 month, so that's not the document, but there is something that will be imminent, if not available, that we would look to use. Once we have that information, I would then propose that we update our policy and align it to link into that affordability criteria. And at the same time, if that affordability criteria changed over time, our policy would automatically shift in terms of that criteria. So, Your Worship, I'm happy to take questions. As I say, today is not about changing the policy, it's more about signalling to Council that it would be our intention to review the policy with that affordability criteria linked to Kiwi Build.
Councillor Mark.
Question. and it may have been discussed, I might have missed it, but how do we ensure that these houses stay affordable? And, you know, I mean, if you were going to buy it, and I know the Kiwi Build has certain, they're talking about, that Richard was talking about before, certain criteria you have to meet. You have to hang on it for 2 hours, 2 years or whatever it is. But what's to stop it being flipped under our policies?
Well, I think that's the key, Councillor Mark, and that's about linking our policy to that Kiwi Build criteria, and also you'll see one of the principles there requiring that the 40% of affordable housing only sold to qualifying first home buyers. And so those first home buyers, and I guess the criteria for first home buyer has obligations around what they must do as well, in terms of how they purchase it, who they are, how long they can hold on to the property. And if they utilise that option as a first home buyer and then sell it out, they can't then come back and they've got one chance. And so,
for sure, yeah.
So it's about us aligning as best as possible with all those rules and tests that the government are putting in place, and I propose that require the developers to sell those houses only to those people who qualify. And so if the government's test is a credible test and locks people in to keep them affordable for 2 or 3 years, then we would follow that same process.
Okay, so we don't have that written down yet anywhere, though?
No, we don't. That's why I'm sort of saying I need the more detail from the government's Kiwi Build to allow us to frame the policy. What we have is the Minister's direction and discussions with Richard and Andrew. We've got this expression of interest, but we need to get a bit more detail.
Okay. There's already existing frameworks, so the government's going to have to look at trying to align those as well. So the Housing New Zealand First Home process, the Welcome Home loans and the KiwiSaver Kickstart program all have the same framework in them.
Right.
They don't talk about the same numbers that the government's talking about in terms of the affordability for a house. It's 3-bedroom in that case is a $550,000 house, where in this case it's $500,000. But it talks about first home buyers, second chance buyers, talks about certain income requirements.
Yeah, for sure. And
also talks about them being in the property for 2 years at least.
Right.
As well. So there's frameworks that exist already, and I will suggest that government will consider Housing New Zealand being the vehicle they do this, because in all 3 of those programs that I just mentioned, Housing New Zealand is the administrator for all 3 of them as well.
Right.
So there will be some consistency, I suggest, in the program going forward.
Yeah, I guess as a governor of a city, or at least half a city, then we could be just creating a temporary affordable housing situation. You know, if all these houses are suddenly going to leap up in value when these people sell their houses. So I'd be really interested.
And I guess, Councillor Mark, yes, that there is always that risk, and I think that's why we want to take our chance to look at closely what the government scheme is, how it works, and I guess if we're able to deliver a sufficient volume of these properties at that 40% of properties on these SHA applications at that level, you are starting to create almost a second market of those properties, and there may not necessarily be that jump in capital value you're assuming could be the case, because there is such a supply of those properties on the market. They have created their own market themselves.
Okay, thank you. That's cool.
Councillor Angela.
Is there any indication of when we will know the detail of all of this Kiwi Build stuff? Because we're not going to be able to progress a review of the policy until we know all of that, because there'd be no point, right?
I'm expect it to be any day now, Angela. So we're reaching out to many layers within the government. The Minister has indicated to Andrew and Richard that it's imminent. It may be announced in the budget. But certainly this document that I've obtained overnight certainly indicates they've got some thinking in place already with the tender process. So we're reaching into MB at the moment to try and clarify that.
And it will be by, depending on what the Kiwi Build policy has in it, it's still by choice whether we include it in if we make a review of the policy?
Absolutely.
If there's something in there we don't like?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the key here is that the policy will come back to this table for consideration. What I don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. If the government have got a process which is robust, and I guess also any SHA application, the Minister has to agree to it to proceed. So if the Minister is saying to us, that in order to be acceptable, you must deliver 40% of affordable homes, and affordable homes are defined as per the Kiwi Bill criteria. That must be our starting point to try and find the
And I mean, we don't have an actual percentage written into our policy yet, but we've indicated the Mayor wrote to the SHAs that are on board now to say this is the indication we're getting from the Minister when he first started talking about 40%, and yet they've all presented today without that in our policy by saying, yes, we can deliver 40%. So
yes, that's good. So we are to in effect achieving that outcome today.
Yeah, as long as I guess what I'm indicating is we've got that ability to be nimble now if we had to. When we write something into a policy, there's very little room to move once we start prescribing things. So just something
I think, Angela,
I'm sure you'll be thinking about.
Yeah, and I think this is where if we were to write something into the policy, I'd rather potentially link it to some things that the government refer to as opposed to hard-coded in our policy.
Yeah, agree. Thanks.
Councillor Dave, bless you.
Yeah, look, just a question in relation, Blair, to the principles in paragraph 20, page 386.
Yes.
I'm looking at the principle A, increasing the number of and speed at which affordable homes are built, and I'm looking for the one that's before A, talking about the speed of processing through council, because it seems to me that certainly listening to some of the issues raised by speakers at the public forum and other comments around the place, that's also an issue. Isn't that something we want to build into our policy, that it's got a fast track in this building?
I think
and other council processes?
Look, quite agree, Councillor Dave, and I guess in paragraphs 21 to 25 I talk about there a dedicated team needing to be established within council. That's absolutely designed to lean up our process, make it as quick as possible, so that from an expressions of interest process through to gazetting, we have taken out all the time to speak to exactly what you're saying. So whilst I may not mention it in the principle, I can absolutely guarantee...
It seems to me it's part of the principle, though. That's the reason of having the SHA Act, the HASHA Act, when we already had an RMA Act.
So if I've overlooked it, my apologies, but it's a foundation principle that I'm working towards.
It's just all the rest of them relate to government and developer targets. Where's the one relating to our targets?
Yes.
This is really what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I think paragraph 23, for example, speaks to the same matter, and it is about absolutely end-to-end. At the moment, Councillor Dave, we are learning on this SHA process. Today is the...
Look, I take it, I absolutely understand that staff are doing that. They're implementing a fast-track thing. But look, after 5 years of the planners getting their hands on it, like happened with the RMA, it'll become a dog that you wish you could put out to pasture. Seriously, and I think, I think we should enshrine it as a principle somewhere that it's got to be something better than always better than the standard planning process.
Yeah, so happy to note that.
Yeah, so the process today. So the process today in terms of the SHAs that came forward today, and there was a comment made by some of the submitters today that was effectively poking back at staff. That's not the case. There's an entire story behind all of them in terms of the information requirements to receive and so forth. And we're going to go a little bit about that with the May 22nd briefing on one of them in particular to explain the process. The SHA legislation had its value, but it didn't necessarily cover all of the solutions. So we've been developing and learning on the fly as we go through as well. And there's a very much a willingness from all the team, including and led by the planners, to go as fast as we can in this space.
Can I use a good example, Councillor Dave? We now have a template for the statement of intent, which we've refined over the three from today. So that's now a really good practice template we would use straight away. So there is an example of something that was cited by the person in public forum this morning, which we've now got available. So there's many areas we can certainly save time.
And the other thing we intend to do, just to help the government out, is we're going to draft everything right through to a gazette level, so that the Parliamentary Council doesn't have to be involved. We're going to just basically give it to the Minister and say, please rubber stamp this, is probably the goal. So we speed up.
Why don't you give them the rubber stamp as well?
We can. An option. Yep. So we're on track to do this, and we already are.
Yep. Thanks.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. My question relates to the criteria for what's affordable and its relevance to various areas of the country. will it be a one-size-fits-all, or will it be taken to consideration special situation of Hamilton versus other populations? I mean, I know that, for example, we have a strong percentage of aged individuals looking for, smaller housing on the one hand, and then we have a bubble of youth who are coming through to first home ownership model plus a strong migration trend. So do those sort of things get factored in terms of where we land with what's affordable for Hamilton?
So look, I think all those points will be well made to the government and discussions that have been had between the Mayor, Richard, myself, etc. At the moment, the documentation and the Minister's advice is $500,000 for all communities outside of Auckland and Queenstown. So the government officials have deemed that is the level.
That's $500,000 if you were in Morrinsville or in Hamilton?
Correct. So it's $500,000 outside of those two communities. Now, as I say, Councillor Paula, I'm only looking at the expressions of interest document, so I'm waiting to see the more comprehensive Kiwi Build documentation. There may be, over time, an inflationary aspect to that or other factors, but the Minister has been very clear to us in his conversations, it is $500,000 at the present time.
So one of the other things you would have raised with him, I assume, is that land prices in Hamilton versus some of the other centres would be quite different. So you've got to pay a price for the land, and then you've got your improvements. Yep. So you can put less improvements on if your land is more expensive.
Yes, yeah. I think the Kiwi Build scheme clearly is targeting those areas where the house price pressure points are more challenging, and so they are targeting the bigger metro areas, as opposed to some of those smaller communities. So that's why the number that's been set is set in more of a context of a Hamilton, a Tauranga type, Christchurch type community, as opposed to potentially a smaller district.
Okay, well,
because the target of Kiwi Build is to really target those primary bigger communities, bigger
yes,
centres.
yeah, I understand that, but I'm just thinking of what's in the best interest of Hamilton to get, because it's going to be a bit of a challenge, isn't it, to build for that price?
Look, I think Mayor Andrew, Chief Executive, have engaged with a number of different developers to test that threshold, to understand what their feedback is, and you even heard the developers today, and their feedback has been that, look, it's a challenge, but with things such as flexibility from our planning considerations, haste through the process in terms of compared to an RMA process, getting to an SHA fast, changed in densities, smaller buildings, smaller sized houses that meet the definition of a house, will enable them to deliver product to the market at around that price point. So their feedback is they can do it.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been looking at with the developers is whether or not, if we look at the yield through section sizes and site coverage, and they can potentially make and take a development focused view of the entire subdivision, they can effectively build, if it's 10 houses that are all of a similar quality, of a reasonably good quality, but through that distribution of the yields across the entire development, achieve the 40% at affordable pricing. So effectively make the market across the entire development averaged out.
Yeah.
So
I do understand that.
That's the option as they're trying to work through.
I guess from my point of view, Richard, we also are going to have to keep in mind some of the things that Rob's kind of raised in his questions, like the provision of amenity, because if houses are on a smaller section and therefore have less yard space for playing in and those kind of things, or less space to park more than one car, etc., then it does have potential implications for us as a city council going forward. Well,
that's an interesting reason that the Jepson Place sign off of the SHA took a little bit longer through from a government point of view, is they were applying a full wellbeing scope to it. So they wanted to make sure that it addressed not only just the affordable criteria, but it actually didn't sacrifice the other aspects of the wellbeings as well. So what you're saying is definitely where this current government's thinking as well. So that will potentially come through. I mean, the Minister has said that he quite likes this. Well, he likes the flexibility the special housing area legislation provides councils, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see an extension of the legislation, but I suggest if they extend it, there'll be some adaptation of the rules currently within it as well.
Devil's in the detail, isn't it?
I think, Councillor Paula, the other comment I'd just make is when we do change our policy, if we change the policy, that we don't hard code that specific dollar figure. Because I think if the Kiwi Bill criteria over time needs to change or they have different figures for different communities, such as Hamilton versus other communities, we want to ensure that our policy is flexible to respond to Kiwi Bill as opposed to a number that we just hard code. Because clearly we want it to be successful and we want product to be delivered that is of the type that you're talking about.
So this is the sort of thing that comes up in what you were saying before in these negotiations with the developers of SHAs as to how they can factor in as many of those other well-being aspects to the development.
Yeah, and I think the other comment I would also make is aligned with this expressions of interest. If some of our developers can be eligible and qualify for a Kiwi Build program where the government is either underwriting or purchasing that 40% or some of that 40% stock off the plans, that can also de-risk the financing for the developers in terms of their development proposal. So that's the ultimate here, that our policy for an SHA has these requirements for affordable homes, 40%, that the developer can then partner with the government to sell some or all of that 40% through the Kiwi Build scheme, and they get surety of return, early cash flow, etc. So that helps in terms of that whole cycle of making it work. That's the intention.
Good.
Councillor Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Look, my questions focus on 27 and 28, where financial considerations we've got not applicable and risks we've got not applicable. And my question is really around the council having signed up for the targeted building when we signed and became part of the Housing Accord. Today we've spent quite a bit of time on the 40% target within each of the SHAs to be affordable homes. Now we've got potentially, and I haven't seen the detail, but nor has anyone else except for what you've seen around Kiwi Build, I just kind of sense that there is an increased risk coming along to not just to the council, but to all the parties who are likely to be involved in these SHAs. And I just wonder if, as you're continuing on that journey, Blair, you're comfortable that council isn't taking on increased risks. And when I read paragraph 23, increased costs, because if we have to set up a dedicated team to manage what appears to be from the 3 SHAs that we've seen this morning and today are pretty complex, and they're all one-offs and they're all bespoke, are we potentially putting ourselves in for some significant costs simply to be part of this process? And of these costs, will the ratepayer end up footing most of the bill for this rather than the developer and or central government? Sorry, it's a mouthful, but
that's a great question. And look, this is not an easy issue to unpack. I mean, I acknowledge that all high growth councils are grappling with this issue, and we're grappling with how do we deliver and align with the government's aspirations and our community's aspirations for a mix of housing and affordable housing to deal with growth. So just to go to your question, does this expose council to risk and to cost? We've seen certainly through the conversations this morning that with any consenting process in any area that's out of sequence or different, there are going to be conversations around infrastructure, and there are going to be conversations potentially relating to upsizing of infrastructure. And so I think you've seen through this morning's conversations that in some of those instances, council may make a decision to participate or to recognise some value towards that upsizing or infrastructure that may expose us to cost. So I think the answer is possibly in that space, but that will always be a decision for council to make. In terms of a dedicated team or a fast-track process, we do have the ability to pass those costs on to the applicant through this process, and so that is something that we would look at through this process in terms of sharing some of all those costs with the applicant, as we do for other consents in terms of the normal consenting process. So we do have that ability. In terms of risk, I guess the question is to what extent is our SHA is going to become a part of our landscape into the future? We've got 6 at the present time we're working through, 4 that you've seen at this table, 2 to come. The government, currently the legislation expires in 18 months' time in terms of the application period or the processing period. The government is considering to extend that legislation date. That hasn't yet happened. So we may see many more SHAs over time. So that may mean that as a council we're working through a number, quite a few more of these, and so we will have to become adept at addressing these. But I also think that is the new landscape of how we are going to be delivering and responding to growth issues in the future. I think flexibility, finding different solutions, working with developers, not necessarily council just putting infrastructure out in front and waiting for developers to come. I think we're going to have to be far more agile and nimble, and SHAs will be an example of where we have to understand those risks and present those to you and manage those and mitigate those. So I think that's the nature of how we're going to have to work in the developments in the future. Because of the fact that councils' balance sheets are more challenged, because we're trying to deliver affordable stock, because we're trying to work in partnership with the government, the old traditional style isn't going to be the way that we do it. So it's a long answer, Rob, but it's...
Yeah, so, but coming back, are you identifying now that there is some increased risk? So if we just look at risk separately from cost, are you sensing that as we've moved further beyond the housing accord, which we signed back in December 17, that as we've continued on this journey, the risks for council have continued to increase?
I think our risks probably have increased, but and I think it comes down to we're going to have to be very commercially. Our commercial focus is going to be very strong. We already have a strong commercial focus in terms of our growth and how we engage with the development community. But if we have more of these types of agreements and developments, it just means we're going to have to be really spending time and effort to make sure we strike a good deal for both the developer and council to mitigate and understand those risks for both parties. So it doesn't mean that the risks are unsatisfactory, Rob. It just means that because we're dealing with lots of these types of developments, we have to understand those risks, be clear about them and work through how we mitigate and manage those and share those costs. So they're not insurmountable.
So do you think there's an easier way that this could be done? I mean, it seems to me that the number of parties that are involved in this, if you go back to the 50s when we had quite a big housing shortage, it was dealt simply by central government and dealt seemingly quite efficiently then by central government. I just sense that we've got too many chefs at the sink,
I think it's
and potentially will make a mess of it.
I mean, Richard, I want to say something here, but certainly if the Kiwi Build scheme as described by the Minister to us, and as I say, to see all the detail, can deliver the end-to-end solution, then potentially that actually lowers some of the risk in terms of the equation, because it joins up a buyer to the proposal early in the piece and can de-risk the developer, and to that extent de-risks council as well, because we can all see the revenue. Because ultimately this is about getting houses to the market, putting infrastructure to support those, and ensuring that we get good urban design outcomes in the process. A lot of the issues that we're grappling with is how do we fund the infrastructure to support the proposed development. If we had an unlimited amount of money, that wouldn't be an issue. So we're trying to find the best way to manage the risk of infrastructure delivery and how we fund that. And so, Rob, if you had a government saying, I'm prepared to buy 40% of these houses at this level and I'm going to sign up on day one, that allows all parties to go into discussions with a lot more certainty and I guess ability to commit to things.
So do you think that's how Kiwi Build will and obviously you can't give away anything that hasn't been made public at this stage, but is that how you think Kiwi Build will enter the market?
It's certainly one of the ways it can enter the market, and that's one of the ways that we understand it's going to work, whether it's available to every single SH application or every proposal, but certainly that is the intention. So yes.
When will we know?
Well, I guess I look at this expression of interest document here, which is calling for expressions of interest right now for developers to deliver product at that price point of either $500,000 in Hamilton or $650,000 in Auckland. for the government to potentially evaluate those and potentially to purchase those as Kiwi Build property. So I guess we're starting to see, albeit it's 1 day, it's been 1 day in the market, the starting signs of what the Kiwi Build framework's going to be. And certainly, if you looked at the media overnight and this morning, there's been a few articles around what the commentators' view is on how that scheme will work or won't work. It's just too early to know.
Are we best to leave B, C in the staff recommendation until we know what Kiwi Build is really going to be all about and just receive this report?
Well, I think that B and C is noting work that we would be doing. Ultimately,
it's not really a decision, is it? It's really just noting the continuing work.
Ultimately, the policy is going to come back to this table to consider.
No, look, I'm happy that, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks. Rob, I'm really interested in your questions about risk. What do you mind if I just, are there some examples, like the risk is that we might approve an SHA and the developer and all the costs have been put on the developer and then the developer tips over? Is that, I'm trying to figure out what you mean.
Not really as bad as that,
okay.
But I'm thinking about, the 40%. Affordability, and I raised that this morning in terms of
again is
who that risk falls with. Who comes back and does the accountability at the end of the subdivision, if you like, to say, hey, you only achieved 20% affordability homes there.
So Councillor Rob, for example, again, really skimmed through this, but the expression of interest document talks about if you qualify as a Kiwi Build. You have to list the number of dwellings that are being sold. And there's a register, and also there's quite a criteria that the government have put in place around the homes that have been delivered and sold. But
it's after the event, Blair. It's the house. The only time you can actually measure, I think, that you've achieved the 40% will be when the SHA is complete and you've sold all the properties and the houses and the
And I think this is why I don't want to bring a policy back to this table till we understand a bit more about that end-to-end and how that solution will work. But ultimately, properties that are sold, the 40% properties that are sold as affordable, at some point they'll eventually be able to be resold on the open market. But the detail there will be how long are they held by the first home buyers. What are the requirements around that? What are they? As Richard said, the Housing New Zealand scheme has definitive requirements around people who can qualify under that scheme. Eventually, those people will be clear of those requirements. They will no longer be a first-home buyer. They'll be able to be free to sell them.
Yeah, so but I guess can I just interrupt here? Yep. We're talking about a policy that central government hasn't released yet, trying to second guess. And I just think that this conversation is going nowhere. We until central government release their policy, which we've been waiting for now for months, and it is coming. But until that comes, I just don't think we're trying to second guess how it all works when central government's working very closely with MB and other groups to bring this forward, so that then we have something to work with. And I really think until we've got that policy, this is about basically anticipating and waiting for that policy to come out.
And my only concern there, Andrew, is that we're not committing ourselves to any risks that we might subsequently find that it's simply unattainable for us to deliver the 1,200 homes and the 40% and whatever other obligations we have by being involved and committing to this whole process.
You just got to remember we also have an opportunity to bring the policy will come back for approval. So at this stage, it's more, even though it's got more than receiving the report, effectively it's just guidance at this point in time. So we're not really committing to anything. That's why there's no financial risks or other risks identified at this stage, because the risk itself will eventuate, if it does eventuate, when we can bring the policy back.
Kiwi Build is going to be putting into their thing, that we bring that to a briefing, and then that draft policy, that sort of normal process,
yeah, we will bring
more
it back.
valuable than having it all here.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to a briefing, because a lot of these kind of questions, I think, are briefing type questions, Councillor Angela.
Yeah, cool. Just been helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. We have no discussion.
Excuse me, Andrew, we did make a minor change. Can I take that?
We'll just get it up on the board. Yeah.
Clarity changes, no change in sneaky. Oh, you know me so well.
Just to make it clear that it is coming back.
No, we will, GM Blair will make sure it comes to a briefing once we receive it.
Absolutely, I've noted that already. Yep.
All those for, any against, carried. Okay, we'll now go to the updates from the City Solicitor on tomorrow's hearing, which is a verbal, sorry, we're coming back to it. Oh, just Lachlan's looking pretty lonely there and costing us a lot of money. So, do you want to introduce him, Chief Executive?
So, Lachlan was an item was added to the agenda during the agenda approval for a verbal update from the City Solicitor prior to tomorrow's hearings. And the reason it was put on today's agenda, not tomorrow's, is the City Solicitor is unavailable tomorrow. We get the discount on Friday, that's why we wanted to do it today.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. No, the Chief Executive, just to update you on some process-related matters, because there has been some feedback and concern relating to some aspects of the consultation process, and in particular a question which I understand has caused some confusion or concern. And I've been briefed on the issue, and I've advised the Chief Executive. I've looked at the issue, the question and the response that Council has taken, and I'm satisfied that everything that you've done and you're intending to do is robust and is going to put you in a good and strong legal position in terms of compliance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. So there's a couple of points I want to make. The first is that there has been, I think, a good level of visibility around the issue in the last few days. So I understand that there has been some media associated with the issue, so there is a sort of a heightened public awareness over the issue. So for those submitters that are concerned that they might have misread the question and got it wrong, through that heightened public awareness, there's going to be hopefully an opportunity for people to catch their submission if they are concerned about it. So that's the first point. The second is that there is, as I understand it, the strategy around how this information is going to be reported, so how the data is being collected and summarised by Council staff, and there will be the appropriate cautions and acknowledgements around this particular question and the reliability or any concerns about the data associated with the question. And then the third point that gives me a strong degree of comfort that you're in a safe place is that there, as I understand it, there's going to be a process during your hearings over the next 3 or 4 days where the hearing administrators will be making it very clear to submitters that there is this issue, and asking all verbal submitters to consider their own submission and whether or not they were confused or misread the question, and then given an opportunity to clarify that and turn that around when they give their verbal submissions. So I think there's some practical steps that you'll take and your hearing administrator will take which will address those issues. The other point that I would make, just stepping back from it, is that what the Local Government Act requires in terms of your consultation is to put yourself in a position where you have a good understanding of the views and preferences of the community and those that are affected by the decisions. It's not a referendum on the numbers, so you're not going to be making decisions based on which particular set of numbers is carried. Those numbers will give you a sense of where the community sits, but ultimately it's not a referendum that's based on any particular votes one way or the other. So I think when you step back and look at the body of information, you can be assured that you'll have the views and preferences of the community well understood by the end of the hearing process. So on the whole, I've looked at what staff are intending to do to deal with the situation, and I'm confident that you remain legally compliant. And you know, I think the key thing to remember is that this consultation hasn't finished. There's an important next stage, which is going to be the hearings themselves, where people will have an opportunity to come along and speak to you. So, you know, don't view it as a single snapshot in time. This is a process that's ongoing, and it's yet to be completed. So, with that in mind, I'm very comfortable and confident that you're in a legally robust position.
Questions, Councillor Gary?
There was also some concern about redaction. It's blacking out swear words or blacking out people's addresses and things like that, I think. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of it.
And comfortable with it, or is there any concerns?
Yeah, comfortable. Okay. I mean, again, I understand that there were, yes, swear words and profanities that were redacted, which is, you know, a perfectly reasonable position for council to take. I think everyone can imagine that even with the redacted words, the import and the themes in the submission will not be lost. So again, I don't think that raises any concerns about you not having good information to base your decisions on. And if you want to, there's nothing to stop you going directly to those submissions and seeing the originals if you are curious to those redacted provisions. So no problem at all.
Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I got everything that you said in there. I think that was along the lines of the discussion yesterday about giving people the right to correct if they wish, which I strongly support. Now, you were talking about people who come and speak to us, and obviously there is a point at which they can correct because they're directly in front of us. The ones that I didn't quite catch what we were doing with the ones that had that indicated they don't want to speak and were just written. We're not endeavouring to get hold of them by email and just offer them that.
I had understood that those that had indicated that there was an error, that they had made an error with the answer that they had given, that they had the opportunity to correct it. And I thought that had extended beyond those that were simply going to turn up at the hearing. But beyond that, it's very difficult to understand. It's like proving a negative. You'll never know just how many are out there that have got this wrong, but it's impossible to determine that one way or the other.
So can I just add into that? So where there's inconsistencies between the commentary and the tick box, we're going back to those individuals to make sure that they have an opportunity to correct that inconsistency. So we'll say, you said, for example, I don't support XYZ project, but you didn't tick XYZ project. We've checked all those inconsistencies and we've emailed them to notify them that there is an inconsistency and asked for them to give us clarity where their position sits. So was it a grammatical mistake, i.e. I do support X, Y and Z, or was it a tick box mistake? And so they had that opportunity as well.
Gosh, okay, thank you. That's quite time intensive. You know, when I was talking in the workshop yesterday, I was just wondering whether, because it's just a form email and a database, whether a very short to the point thing saying some people have made errors on this question. You may be one, you may not, but could you check submission online, and if you would like to correct this, you have the opportunity to. Could we not do that?
The significant publicity already has done that, and we didn't get a lot of people. Well, there's been lots of publicity on this, and not everyone. No, a whole lot of people haven't come forward. So we've been very direct.
The publicity through those of us who've done it through social media.
Oh no, there's been 2 media articles on this as well.
Okay.
Councillor Mark.
Yeah, Richard, okay, so that looking where their dialogue was inconsistent with the tick box is one thing, but what about those who have ticked and not done any dialogue, and they might have? How do we reach those people? How are we going to know, or are you just?
Well, firstly, there has been at least 2 articles on this, and we haven't had a huge pickup. And I'm unsure. Last time I asked, there's about 5 people that had contacted us for changes. We've gone out of our way now to read through all of the submissions and check for inconsistencies, to do that as well, and challenge those individuals as well. But they relied a little bit on the quality of the media in this space. They've raised a lot of questions, and we haven't had a huge level of response.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right, because yesterday I asked about sending out a blanket email along the lines of what Paula was talking about there before. Is it your opinion and yours perhaps that would create more hassle than it's worth? Is that what? I say hassle, I'm not talking about work, but more hysteria than it's worth.
I think,
for want of a better phrase.
Well, as I said, I mean, I'm comfortable that in terms of the response that you've had to the issue,
okay.
and in terms of what the staff are intending to do with the hearing process, that you're taking a proportionate approach.
Right.
I mean, you have a discretion. All of these consultation decisions that you make and the way that you consult, you have discretions as to how you achieve the principles of consultation.
Yep.
I'm very comfortable with the decisions that the staff have made in terms of the response to this issue. You're legally compliant, and I think also, you know, I come back to the point, there's a significant process still to unfold. You've got 4 or 5 days of hearings, and as I say, anyone who is coming to the hearings will have the opportunity to identify this particular question and make a correction if necessary. Again, this is not a numbers game. This is that's part of it, but the consultation is qualitative. So you're about picking up themes and broad community views to help you inform your decisions. It's not a decision based on, you know, the tallying up the results. That's not how the LTP decision making works.
No, it's not a referendum.
No.
Okay, Councillor Angela.
Sorry, Andrew, Councillor Henry and I have to go to the museum function now, but it seems to be a mix of questions and comments. Thank you, Lachlan. I wasn't after legal questions when I raised any of my concerns. I was after practice and I was chasing best practice. And I am disappointed that the organisation didn't put the communications out, that it was left up to the media. But the process is the process now, and we do go into it tomorrow. But you didn't say anything that I don't already know. It's not about a referendum, and those weren't the concerns that I was raising. I feel that in this forum, I had to say that. This was about, I was looking for best practice.
And can you please just wait till we'll go into debates, and it's
but
the time.
But there's no item to debate.
Yeah,
we're just getting in.
We'll be moving to accept the verbal report, and that's a chance to
we
debate.
Have to go.
Okay, so you will have an opportunity. Yeah. So I'll move to accept the report, seconded by Ange. Yeah, seconded by Ange. So we're now in debate. So Ange, go ahead.
Oh, no. Just what I said.
Ditto.
So, excuse me, Gary, we're in debate. I just want to make it very clear that this process, once again, was set up with a working group of half the members, or a group of members around this table, which I was one of, who approved or had the opportunity to go over the documents and approve it, and this was a council-led approval process where we instructed staff what to do and staff came back and did what we asked. So if there was no interest in members attending the meetings who were on the task force or on the working group, that can only fall back on members. This was a member-led process, not a staff-led process. So I just can't stress strongly enough that we own this document. And if you were on the task force and didn't bother turning up to the meetings, then don't turn around now and scream at staff and scream at the process when we had every opportunity to speak up. So it appears to me very strongly that confusion's being introduced into a process and blame is being attributed back to staff when it was our process. So just let's look in the mirror, guys. Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Well, I wasn't on the working party, but I don't want to sling mud at those that were either, because I suppose within the 500-page plus agenda, maybe I also overlooked the ambiguity of that question. Having said that, I don't think this is about blame, and I'm not blaming the staff either. They have, well, Julie in particular has bent over backwards to get as many people to publicly engage with this process as possible. I know she's got a team behind her, And the governance team have worked very hard, and Sean's team have worked very hard to and that's why we've got record numbers of people submitting. So this is no criticism. I don't want to slink mud at anyone. I just think that we have found ourselves in a situation that's less than ideal, and now we are looking at mechanisms to put that right. I didn't think it was a big drama to put one form email out to those people, because we do have their email addresses. Didn't want to rev it up, create a big dramatic statement about it, but just point out their opportunity for correction is all. That was my preference. That's what I said in the workshop yesterday. I've done my best, as I know a number of other councillors have, to encourage people to make that correction, and I appreciate everybody who's shared that on and who is encouraging as many people to if they made the error. Because you're quite right, Richard, it could be 10 people, it could be 20 people, it could be 200 people. We actually don't know. One of my other concerns about this is that I think, what did you say, Rob? There was a small percentage of people who actually want to be heard out of the overall submitters. The majority of the submitters do not want to be heard. And I guarantee they pushed the send button on their submission and then went on about their life and didn't really give it much attention, and possibly overlooked the 2 media articles too, because, you know, not everybody's glued to the media or glued to politics on a daily basis. So I just think, you know, let's put it right. Let's not blame anyone here. Let's just get the best information we can from the public. Thank you. And sorry,
Can I just remind the member that this is an opportunity to put an amendment to carry out on the speech you just made, carry through. This is an opportunity for you to, this is your chance right now, if you want to, follow through on what you're saying to put an amendment.
well, then I'll foreshadow a simple amendment. I don't feel I'm going to be successful in this because 2 of the voting members have left. But look, you know, my amendment, if it's okay with you, Mr Mayor, is just to suggest that we do send a very simplified form email out to all of the submitters and offer them the chance within a set period of time, 3 days, 5 days, whatever's suitable.
So can we just take a 5-minute break where the member can put her words precisely down in a way that staff are comfortable
Mayor
with,
Andrew,
so that we can test
before that, it might be worth just to get a show of hands if anybody's at least a bit interested in this.
With respect, through the chair, let me see the amendment first.
Okay.
Open-minded.
Okay, all right, let me talk to something.
When are you going to do it?
Can we just get through
Get through this one
because
first.
we've got staff waiting to
Yeah,
present.
go on then. Where you going?
Yep, let's go.
Why don't we just do it with a resolution? We'll just get on and do it.
Yeah, just ask for a seconder.
No, I'll just do it.
I thought the email addresses had all been redacted.
They exist in the system.
To be honest, I don't necessarily need a resolution to do this. If councillors overall believe that I should do it, I will do it. The argument we put forward is that we believe that the response was greater than the issue, but if councillors believe that we should send an email out to all, we don't need to worry about this resolution. We can just accept the verbal report and I'll get on with it. If anyone has an issue with that, tell me now. Otherwise, I'll do it.
Hang on. We're in the process now. I'll withdraw my motion. Angela, you'll withdraw yours. Yes, dear. Okay. How do we go about that, withdrawing a motion?
Yeah, Angie, your second is not here, but you withdraw it. It's not point having 25%. So let's, in the interest of efficiently, let's consider it withdrawn.
I move that I withdraw my motion. I need 75. Don't I need 75%? No. Okay. Okay, so I'll withdraw my motion, and Paula's amendment becomes the motion.
They may review. They may review their submission, because that means that they don't have to, but that's all in their choice then. It's just a little bit softer. May. No, just may review.
Only in May as well, not June.
They may wish to is I can live with. Honestly, I can live with may wish to.
They may and may.
It just puts the power in their hands if they choose it. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if possible, because I'm looking at possibly seconding it. Do we? Oh no, sorry, I've just read it properly. That's all right. I'll shut up now.
Okay, so seconded by Councillor Mark. Okay. So we're going straight to debate. We've asked no questions on this one, so we're in debate. Should we just go straight to the vote, guys? Okay, Councillor Gary. Hang on, Paula. Councillor Paula, do you want to talk first? I think I said enough on it, actually. Councillor Gary.
I speak against it. I think we run the, and I know it's sincere. I'm not knocking this thing, but I do think we run the risk of creating huge confusion now. If you ask people to have another crack at the thing, I don't think we can articulate our question well enough to explain to people what's happened. If people don't know that there has been this confusion, they will wondering what on earth is going on. I think we run the risk of creating more confusion than we already have. Not that I think that there is major confusion at the moment.
Can we just ask the City Solicitor where we stand legally, on this?
There's nothing to stop you doing this. So, as I say, the Local Government Act gives you a broad discretion to make your own decisions as how you meet the requirements of consultation and the principles of consultation. I have said to you that I think that your current response, which doesn't include this approach, is proportionate and appropriate and legally robust. If you want to go beyond that and introduce this additional step, it's perfectly within your powers to do it.
Can we ask staff if it's practical that we do it?
Does that mean as in can we do it?
Is it practical and reasonable, and can we do it within the time frames?
Mayor, yes, we can do it. I'll just caution that we don't this is for all respondents. Obviously, a number haven't provided email addresses, but we'd be able to contact the vast majority of submitters. So if council was satisfied with that, then that would be the way that we'd manage it. I think when we looked at a sample previously, I think we had email addresses for about 85% of submitters, give or take. Please don't quote me on that, but that was when we looked a while back.
Sorry, could you repeat that number for the minutes? Just kidding.
Okay, Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
I obviously will support the
obviously?
Huh?
Why obviously?
Well, I'll obviously look. I mean, well, I just want to agree with the Mayor. Ultimately, I am accountable, not staff, because we signed this off. Every person who was on the working party, obviously, I delegated to that working party full faith in their work, but we are accountable. As simple as that. And what I'm really anxious to ensure is that hard-working, loyal public servants, staff, don't get caught in some political crossfire that I suspect may have a little bit to do with the local government elections in 2019. May have a little bit to do. I've been around a long time and, you know, that is life. But please, happy to support this motion, absolutely. But we take the accountability for this, not people who work for us and have acted actually under our instruction.
Councillor Dave.
I agree with the Deputy Mayor, so obviously I'm opposing this motion. Because it's overkill to the extreme. It's becoming a three-ring circus. We've done extensive publicity on it, and it's not just in the media. If Councillor O'Leary's Facebook page doesn't get to the people that aren't in the media, then I don't know what will, because I've certainly had a lot of feedback via that, because my name's been tagged in lots of times, and to Councillor Southgate's Facebook page, I might add on this point as well. Yep, twice last night. No, I didn't bother reply because I didn't want to use up all of your volume, your data cap on your page that would have taken then. Look, even we cannot get to everyone. Anyway, we've been told that. So then there's going to be arguments, is this 85% the full result? It's just ridiculous. We've done as much as we can to correct what appears to be a minor piece of confusion. We've been advised that that's what we've done plenty. We've been advised of that. If we want to do more, that would be fine if it was logical and productive, and I'm certain it's not going to be.
Councillor Mark.
Look, yeah, I'm seconding it, so I will support it. I would, the wording of it does make sure it remains calm and pertains to question number 8. I probably am the only one that's going to own up that I was on the working party and I didn't go to as many of those as I should, so I take it on the chin. And you make a good point, Mayor Andrew, that a lot of this has been deflected to staff. So I want to sort of put it out there right here and now that that as one of the 3 members on the working party, you know, we do need to step up and shield the staff in this respect because it is our document. Having said that, I think this is, look, I don't think this will create the mass hysteria that some of us are worried about, as long as the wording is absolutely right. And I think, look, we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that no one is confused. But look, the bottom line is, it's up to us as intelligent members to interpret the data as we see fit, and it is a part of a process. So it's not a referendum, I get that, but I also, as one of those members who's been very keen to get people to submit and has spent a lot of time urging people to submit, rather than just have a crack at you on Facebook. I think this is, you know, let's do everything we can, overturn the stone we can to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. No, submit.
Councillor Leo.
Can't support this. I'd just like to leave the sleeping dogs line, that's all.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you. I didn't realise this was going to take up so much time or effort this afternoon, because I thought I'd made my position reasonably clear in the workshop yesterday. This is about, in my opinion, at this point, about goodwill, and picking up on the point that Angela made, is about good practice, best practice even. Not blaming anyone, as I said before, not even those members of the people on the working party, just wanting to get a better outcome. The more data that we can get in, even if it is only 85% of it, that is an accurate reflection of what the ratepayers want, the better. It's just going to help us in the debates that we have and the deliberations we have. You know, this has left a sour taste in the mouth of members of the public. And to me, at this stage, it's not about, because I am satisfied by the legal advice, Lachlan, that you say that we are no longer at risk because the media and the social media sharing of this issue has done somewhat to make amends about it. But let's just show goodwill and give people the chance to correct their issues. We might find, as you say, there aren't that many of them. And that's fine too, because then that in itself will give us greater sense of confidence around the replies that we've already read and taken on board. Yeah, I suspect that this isn't going to fly today, but I'm a massive fan of public engagement. I want to give the public confidence that when they engage with us, we take it seriously, and this is one way that we can show that we do.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
motion is equal.
This is a vital issue. I urge you to consider it.
Where are those two councillors? They should be here for this vote.
Status quo.
Can I just take a couple of minutes, please, to get some advice?
Call the councillors back. Get those two back. Get them back. Oh, no, give them a ring. See if they can come back. They want them back.
Whilst the Mayor is taking advice, we had scheduled a DC briefing update in PX this afternoon. I doubt we're going to have time for that. So we start hearings next week at 9:30 Monday, Tuesday through for the rest of the week. I'm suggesting that a 9 o'clock session one of those days, we come in and ask the relevant staff to present for half an hour to 45 minutes on it before we kick into the hearings, if that's okay with councillors, is a better alternative than staying around tonight to have that done, because we've still got 2 more items in this session before we close. You comfortable with that, councillors? Sorry? Oh, yeah, I was suggesting maybe 8:45 and do 45 minutes from 8:45, something to that effect. Is that okay? Yeah, so I'd suggest 8:45 on Tuesday morning is the goal. 8:30. Okay, I'll send an email out and see what people suggest. I just know we're not going to have time to get it done today, that's all. Councillor Ryan, the death stare.
Yeah. 50-50. Why don't we send it out to half of us?
Half of them. No. No means yes, so we're fine. You've been getting advice on. What I've been getting advice on isn't which way I vote. What I've been getting advice on is whether I vote or not, because I do actually have a choice whether I don't do anything. So I don't have to use my casting vote, and if I don't use my casting vote, the status quo prevails. Status quo is that we just leave the submission process how it is. So, in summing up,
of where I'm going to go is I actually voted against this, but there is strong feeling around this table, and I think the right thing to do here is to use my casting vote to go with sending it back out to ask members, to ask those who we've got email addresses for only, so not postal, and we have to have a cut-off time because you can't leave this open forever, to go back out and with a cut-off time by email only for those who we've got email addresses for, and take their feedback. And I also want to stress to staff that you can't have people cherry picking this, that and the other. It needs to be an inverse or not. You can't, because otherwise you've changed your mind in the meantime. I trust that staff have the wisdom and the ability to actually understand, you know, how that would work.
Will we have the working group frame the question?
No, we're going to leave this to staff, who I have a lot of faith in. So I'm using my casting vote to go with the motion. Thank you.
Can I ask perhaps if the staff could just explain to us what the time limit might be and how the information might be conveyed to us, given that presumably the information will not be available until after the hearings.
We're under time constraint now, so can I ask staff to come back to elected members with an email of just how they're going to set this up? And I think that's the best way. Is yeah.
Why do we need more arguments about this?
Yeah, let's look. We've made our point clear. Let's leave it to staff. Okay, all right. Okay, so we're moving now on to item 8. It's going to the event at the Arts Post. It doesn't start till 5:30. Sorry? Yeah, well, just remind the elected members that your first duty is around this table, not going to a social event down at the museum. Okay? The decisions that you make around this table come first before you go out to social events. A civical event for us is a social event. Okay, so this comes first. So I'm just reminding elected members, I'm speaking at the event. And I'll miss my speaking at the event, my speech at the event, because this comes first. This is what we're here for. This is why we were elected, to make decisions. Okay, so we're moving on to the next. Which item are we on? Can someone help me here, please? Thank you.
Item 8, page 378.
We'll take the report as read, Mr. Mayor, and answer any questions.
What page?
378.
Okay, I'll move. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ryan. Councillor Paula.
Are you in questions?
We're in debate.
Oh, debate. Thank you. I'm just going to speak in support of both, actually, and just mention, because I think there'll be people in the general public who've looked at the report and wondering perhaps why Lake Waiwhakariki isn't making the cut this time, given that we are very aware, as our long-term plan proposal shows, that there does need to be some ability to open up Lake Waiwhakariki with some infrastructure. But just to make that clear, that from my understanding of our discussion on this is that they're not a close fit with this present criteria, and that the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, when it comes out next time, might have a slightly different focus on emerging tourism aspects, or perhaps, or something like this. But this is going to things that already attract tourism, right? And that's why. So I don't want everybody who's a good supporter of Lake Waiwhakariki out there to not feel it wasn't given a good consideration and debate, because it certainly was. certainly support. I'm very excited about the river playing projects at the back of the museum and the boardwalks, because I think that is something that will just increase the connectivity of all the river offerings. We've got Victoria on the river and people love that. And I think the more we can get people using the full length between the museum and Victoria on the river in time, the more fantastic that's going to be. So, and just thank you very much to staff for the good work that you've done. Your report was so good and so easy to understand that it made it really easy to land on the correct options. So I want to thank you for that.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for considering the Te Awa project in there, even if it came out as a big red no. For obviously reasons that it is looking at funding with NZTA. If it doesn't get that, put you on notice. I'm going to come back with it down the track, because I just think that that river path is going to be a major tourist attraction in the city. I'm excited about it. But echoing Councillor Southgate's words, in particular, Lisa, you're a rock star in the work you're doing in the community, so thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Cool.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, I support the staff recommendation, and I think I just want to briefly remember and reflect on the subcommittee chaired by Margaret Forsyth, and the precept was we get our best ducks in the row, so to speak. So this is not about at all whether I think Whaiwhakariki is deserving or not. This is about a calculation from our professional team as to what are the best chances to attract a particular quantum from a particular point. You know, that's the issue. It's not about whether I think that, and I think Councillor Southgate correctly says that, but I think the way we're now doing this is really good, because it's a cold clinical approach, and we are wanting to put our best foot forward, and we're saying, well, okay, that fund does X, Y, and Z, so what is in our smorgasbord of key projects, do we have the best chance to get significant leverage? And I think we had a committee before with Margaret chaired, and I think it was really good, and I'm pleased to see that whole approach is carrying on, and that we also as an organisation are doing this as a whole rather than one bit and the other bit. And obviously, in my view, fingers crossed that we have success, partial success, or whatever. And I just want to say, Your Worship, that I don't underestimate the huge degree of work and the work that actually is involved in putting an application together and pressing the right buttons. And obviously down the track, there's going to be a significant other big projects, obviously acknowledging momentum, where we are going to significant funders, either as a council or groups such as Momentum, and in the end we're going to see hopefully some really good benefit. But I thank the team, you guys, for the work you've done.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed with this decision in that I do not think the river plan projects are going to be a great tourism draw for the city, to be honest, compared with the Te Awa cycle ride, the whole trail from north to south, and in future the Waiwhakariki Heritage Park, coupled with the zoo. I think when you look at the what sort of things tourists are drawn to, it's that sort of thing. I mean, I think the river is going to be very nice for Hamilton residents, but not as a tourism drawcard as in its own right. So I don't have any opposition really to applying for funding for it. If I were Tourism New Zealand Fund, I wouldn't give very much to that one compared with some of the others though. So what I would like to see is a Part C to this added by the movers, that Council receive a report in advance of the next funding round, reconsidering Waiwhakariki and Te Awa funding situations for the Tourism Infrastructure Fund. Because I just don't have a date for that, but I think it was twice a year. Was it? Yep, twice a year. So I'm not saying upend what the proposal is, but or that they stay on the agenda, those two?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of realised that reading it, but if we could actually put it in there, then it's a call-up thing that goes on the meeting list, you know, that's got to come back at some stage.
Mm.
Is that?
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm not sure who, did you move it? Okay, is that all right, Ryan? Yeah. Just say yes.
Should we just get an amendment up, or should we? We'll keep moving forward, and we'll get it up as soon as we
Yeah,
can.
okay, principally I absolutely agree. I'm really excited about this. I think this is awesome. And yeah, I mean, every 6 months, I think it's like we should be the first kid in line with the lolly scramble to be getting as much as we can for as much as we can. And having a bit of a tour at the zoo yesterday, and I know you've had some talks, Lance, with potential investors, etc. That's a real exciting space, and I think if we can sort of tie some of this funding into it, I mean, it's basically like getting things for half price, essentially, if we can get 50% of the funding. So yeah, no, let's go.
Okay, we'll go to the board.
Yeah,
no. We've got that. Everyone comfortable with that change?
Save the board to the next one.
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
And not limited.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Now move to paper 10.
Unanimous.
Which is on page 388.
Let me guess, didn't you go out?
Ricky, thank you. Thank you, Mark. We'll take it as read. I'll move. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Dave. There's no questions. Debate. Anybody want to debate it? All those for? Any against? Carried.
Just a question that follows that. It's not in relation to the issue. There was a court ruling in favour of some aspect of Auckland City Council's thing just last week. Are you not aware of that, Ricky?
I haven't had the opportunity to have a look at that, no, not as of yet.
Okay. It actually ruled against supermarkets. Initially, what it essentially it was, I should say, is that while the argy-bargy was going on over whether hearings should be held into the Auckland's proposed change on the hours, one of the things we got, the Countdown supermarket, or might have been the other one, Progressive, asked for the right to go to the maximum hours possible in the meantime, and the court said, no, you've got to stick with the proposed hours, which is something that we weren't aware of beforehand. So I would like some information coming to the council on that, given that this ruling's in favour of Auckland having in fact, the same reduced hours that we finishing at 9 p.m. for liquor sales, and that the court that does this have actually ruled in favour of going with the council's proposed policy in the meantime while they're waiting for the substantive court hearing,
Okay.
according to the media.
Allow me to have a look at that, and perhaps we can provide an update in the next growth and infrastructure report.
That'd be great if you would, thanks.
Okay, no problem.
We'd send Angela up to present the submission, but since then we've discovered that it's in Auckland. I think there's 10 minutes, and it's on the same day that we have hearings.
Yes,
from
send Angela.
Sorry?
I was just agreeing with you sending Angela.
So I just think it's probably not appropriate to send a member up, and a staff member is probably the right person to do that if the feeling around this table agrees with that.
I'm happy, but I don't think Angela will want to go, but she is recognised, obviously fairly, for the massive work she has done in this area. So it's a shame, because that particular elected member would bring a degree of experience and expertise to the table, which would be very valuable to the select committee. But I think just at least give Angela that option. I strongly suspect she won't want to go, but yeah.
So Ricky, can I?
Yep, happy to
get
do
you to
that.
follow up on that, but also just reminding the member of what else is on it Sunday.
Absolutely.
Because it'll be a whole day up to get to Auckland and back.
Okay, not a problem.
Thank you, everybody. thanks for your patience. Sorry? Where's Lachlan?
No, so Richard said that we were going to do that.
Okay, there was scheduled a briefing now on DCs, but Lachlan's gone. So we'll have to schedule it in for another time. So we declare the meeting next week. Okay.